Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Ian is with us today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
So, were you surprised when you got the grid what our first topic was after our conversation last night?
Yeah, no, not really.
So, last night, Ian and I texted each other, and I was like, we're starting on this topic. Unless something happens, and I'm not going to lie, between like 6 a.m. today and right now, I was like, please, nobody get traded, cut, retire. No, it sound morbid. Die. Like, none of that, please, none of that happen because I want to start on this topic. So, draft night in Nashville, our yearly draft show, is a fan favorite. And it is a fan favorite, I think, for two reasons. Number one, I think there's excellent analysis. Chris and Derek, and this year we got Trevor in the mix. You're not going to find more honest, true, when you're the team's network, you got to kind of pump up, oh, yeah, that was a great pick on Monty Rice. But on our shows, we don't have to do that, and we don't. And I think that's something that people love. And then the second thing is, of course, the Jared Stillman reaction, which is Dylan Radins got picked, I went crazy. Monty Rice got picked, I went crazy. Peter Skoronsky got picked. I went crazy last year. So our draft show is on for right now. It's tentative because, who knows what the NHL is going to do, and hopefully there's not a game. We'll play Wednesday and Friday as opposed to playing on Thursday, but that's a different discussion for a different day. And if you want to see a draft night meltdown, you should hope that the Pro Football Focus mock draft that came out yesterday is what happens on draft night. So we start at the top. This is Pro Football Focus. They put out a mock draft. And, Pro Football Focus, they use a completely different board than everybody else. They use their Pro Football Focus metrics and things like that. And so, again, more power to them. But they use somewhat of a different board, and they've got, I guess, their Pro Football Focus feel. So here's how the Pro Football Focus mock draft went down. We start at pick number 1 with Chicago. Chicago takes Caleb Williams. Ian, is that a surprise?
No.
Not a surprise there. Washington on the clock at number 2. J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan, which as soon as I click this story, I'm like, let's see. And I see J.J. McCarthy at number 2, and I thought, oh, this thing's going to be drunk. This thing's going to be all over the freaking place. Number 3. Denver trades up with New England and drafts Jaden Daniels, which I've seen some crazy things in my life. Here's what's wild. Denver just now has a first-round pick for the first time in what feels like forever because they wasted all of them on Russell Wilson. And now, and I don't know exactly what the terms of the trade would be here, but they're going to have to give up all their first-round picks to go up to 3 to get Jaden Daniels. But it's their mock draft, not mine. Number 4. Marvin Harrison Jr. to Arizona. That I think we can all agree with, just like Caleb Williams to Chicago. Number 5. Joe Alt to the Chargers. Now, I have guaranteed that Joe Alt's not going to the Chargers on a team that has a left tackle and a right tackle and no receivers, but everybody keeps saying the Chargers could do it. Trevor says it. Charles Davis says it. Mark Dominic says it. And now the Pro Football Focus mock draft says Joe Alt to the Chargers at 5. And so now it's like, okay, what are you going to do here? Number 6. Malik Neighbors to the Giants. So now, Caleb Williams, J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison, Joe Alt, Malik Neighbors are off the board. So now we get the best. The last 2 days were the debates, right? Even though Alt's off, you get Drake May, you get Brock Bowers. Tennessee at 7 on the Pro Football Focus mock draft. Dalise Fuaga, the right tackle out of Oregon State. I saw that yesterday, and I thought, what? Dalise Fuaga at 7? Pro Football Focus writes, Quote, the Titans have to go offensive line. With Joe Alt off the board, they simply move on to OT2 in their rankings, which in this case is Thalys Fuaga, a monster run blocker. Fuaga would be a perfect project for new Titans offensive line coach Bill Callahan. No, 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 no. If you guys pay the price of admission for the draft show on Thursday night, if the NHL does not screw us and put a playoff game in there and we're doing the draft show, you are going to get one of the patented draft night meltdowns. Because if the Titans at 7, with Brock Bowers on the board, with Drake May on the board, with, the ability to trade out on the board, if they take a right tackle with the 7th pick, who is not one of the elite 8 players in this draft, I am going to go freaking bonkers. It's almost as bad as taking a guard with the 11th overall pick in a draft. That's how bad it is. So now let's use this crazy and then, of course, J.J. McCarthy, Caleb Williams, whatever. So, to me, at this point, the Titans have 5 choices. And I am not ranking these in any order here. Number 1, draft Brock Bowers. We've talked a lot about Brock Bowers this week. And, again, a lot of these mock drafts have Brock Bowers going, 12, 15, 17. I do think Mark Dominic is probably right that it's probably more likely Bowers goes within the top 10. Bowers does feel like one of the elite players in this draft, and there's just, in any draft, there's not that many elite players. Rick Spielman had him 7th on his board, so I am fine with, Brock Bowers there if that ends up being the pick. The second choice is drafting Rome Odunze, and receiver is absolutely a need for this team. Odunze, there seem to be a lot of mixed opinions on. Some people think that Odunze is the number 2 receiver in this draft. Some people think he's number 3. I feel, and again, I loved him in the Sugar Bowl versus Texas. I didn't love him so much against Michigan in the championship game. But I feel like, to me, it's Neighbors and Harrison 1, 2, and you can pick them however you want. I think they're the same class, and then Odunze is a step back, and then there's everybody else after that. But if the 2 receivers are gone, and I'm sitting there at 7, Odunze probably is in play, certainly before Fuaga with that pick. The third choice they have is the one that we talked about yesterday. A lot of people didn't like very much. Draft Drake May and trade Will Levis. And I'm sure people don't want to hear that, but that's, again, I think, probably the right decision. Another choice they have is to draft Dallas Turner. Remember, right now, Dallas Turner seems to be the consensus number 1 defensive player in this draft. I did talk to somebody yesterday, though, that said that they think that Quinion Mitchell is actually the best defensive player in this draft. But it seems like the consensus amongst all the gurus and even like the former GMs that, have actually done this for a living is that Dallas Turner is the top defensive player in the draft. And if your scouts and your coaches think that Dallas Turner has superstar edge rusher ability, then he's certainly on the board for me. And it's, again, certainly a need because Arden Key ain't that good. And then the last choice they have is to trade the pick to, say, Minnesota at 11, Vegas at 13. And then you've got to get, because you're trading out of one of the elite 8 slots here, you've got to get a next year's first. Right? You got to get a next year's first to go to 11 to take Fashanu or Fuaga or Latham or whatever, but you've got to be able to get next year's first from one of those teams. Because my guess is those teams are going to take Drake May, and if they take Drake May, they'll have a rookie quarterback. They'll probably win 4 games. Manning's team won 3 games when he was a rookie. Joe Burrow's team was terrible too. So I always love having a rookie quarterback's first-round pick. The Giants did it a couple years ago. They had Chicago's first-round pick for Justin Fields. That was a high pick. I think that's what got them Kayvon Thibodeau. I want to say, who was it? Well, I mean, obviously, Chicago has Carolina's pick for whatever, that's worth. Make of it what you want. So I want next year's one, and then they go ahead and get that. If I'm the Titans and I'm in this situation where, again, Caleb Williams goes 1, J.J. McCarthy goes 2, Jaden Daniels goes 3, Marvin Harrison 4, Joe Alt 5. I hate that. Malik Neighbors 6, and I'm on the board. I've told you that if Brian Callahan's scouting report is the same as Tim Hasselbeck's, which we played yesterday, which was Caroline asked Tim, if May falls to 7, what do you do? Tim says, I take him. Then that's probably, if Brian Callahan's like, I'm taking him, then do it. But what I think I would do in this instance is I would look to take May, and then I would call Minnesota, because now all the quarterbacks are gone, unless Penix is in that group. And I would ask Minnesota this question. What would you rather do? Take Penix at 11 or have Levis for 23? Because, again, 23, when we talk about next year's 1, we're hoping that that's going to be the kind of trade that the Titans make with the Rams, where you end up with the 5th pick. You just don't use it on Corey Davis. Like, that's what we're hoping a next year's 1 is. 23 is still a very valuable pick. It's still a good player, but it's not like 23 is a sexy pick. So I tell Minnesota, I'm like, what would you rather have? Would you rather have a player at 11 and keep next year's first rounder, or would you rather roll the dice with Michael Penix and have to take him at 11? So that would be my first thing, is would they do that? And you're going to hate it because you guys are so in love with Will Levis. But, again, in this case, because everything in front of me has just been a complete and total gong show, I'm just taking the best player available, and the best player available, in this case Drake May, is also at the best position, which is quarterback. But the one thing that I absolutely will not do, will not accept, will not nothing, is not an option on this program, is using the pick at 7 and not ending up with one of the elite 8 players in this draft, or getting a first-round draft choice, an extra one for next year. So I can trade out, but I better get a first-round draft choice next year. It does me no good to trade out from 7 to, say, 12 and end up with a couple extra thirds. That does not do me any good, because now I'm going from the elite of the elite at the front in order to move back to take a guy who's not as elite like an Olu Fashanu. And I'm not doing that. So, again, I've said it. The elite 8 players in this draft to me, the 3 quarterbacks, Williams, May, and Daniels, Neighbors, Harrison, Bowers, Alt, Turner. I want one of those 8. And if I don't get one of those 8, I want a first-rounder in next year's draft. But if it ends up being Thalys Fuaga with the 7th overall pick, you people that tune into 102.5 The Game on draft night, you guys will get what you came for, because it will be a meltdown of epic proportions. I may leave the show that day, trying to think who could handle the hosting duties if I go away, with Trevor, Chris, and Derek. I guess Derek would have to do it. I may just go right down to the facility and just go right down to the press conference and just start going crazy. Because Fuaga at 7? No, sir. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We're starting off on that. 615-737-1025. I am putting in a hard rule that I think the Titans should have for this draft. And we'll do that next. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to weigh in. 615-737-1025. We are off and rolling. This week's Nashville's Best Deal is Prince's Hot Chicken, the original and iconic hot chicken joint. Get half off a $25 gift card now while supplies last at theGameNashville.com/deals. And the gift card is only good for the Tanger outlets in Antioch and inside Assembly Food Hall in downtown Nashville.
I had Fashanu down a tier because I don't think he is as complete as Joe Alt. I think the quarterbacks are more complete at their position as we talk today than Fashanu is. That doesn't mean Fashanu's not going to be a great player, but I just had him a tier below.
Do you think Fashanu has a chance to be special, number one? And number two, does that determine?
I think he'll be, a day one starter. I don't think he'll be in the Pro Bowl category or top 5 at his position by the time it's said and done. But he'll be a solid starter that you can win 17 games with.
Hey, that was Rick Spielman, former Vikings general manager, on his podcast with the first pick. And so that was on Fashanu. And again, the Pro Football Focus mock draft has the Titans drafting Dalis Fuaga out of Oregon State with the 7th overall pick. And somebody texted in, our phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com, and says, why are you so mad, Jared, about the Dalis Fuaga pick here? As many times as you've told the right tackle story, it seems like you'd like that pick. The right tackle story means that you need to have a right tackle, which means you could have gone out in free agency and signed Jermaine Illuminor, who got a 2-year, $14 million contract from the Giants. You could have paid him $15 million and gotten him instead of the 14 or whatever it was that he got from the Giants. That is the you need a right tackle. There is a difference between a team with a right-handed quarterback having no right tackle and a team with a right-handed quarterback using the 7th pick on a right tackle who is not an elite player in a draft with 8 elite players in it. And so I'm just going to throw this edict down here. This is, to me, and I'm using Rick Spielman's tiers because as much as you guys can say, well, he drafted Christian Ponder. Yeah, I know. He also drafted Justin Jefferson. He drafted Christian Darrisaw. He drafted, the fact the Vikings have been pretty good for the last decades because of him. I think he's pretty good. So we use his tiers and his kind of rankings on this stuff. And so the edict that I have is that I will not draft, and the Titans should not draft, Olu Fashanu or a right tackle at 7. Like, I'm not doing that at 7. Because, again, I think there are 8 elite players in this draft. Latham at 7, for instance, J.C. Latham out of Alabama, is a no. Because Rick Spielman has him ranked as the 14th best player. You can't draft the 14th best player with the 7th overall pick. Fuaga is a no. Spielman's got him at 16. And Fashanu's a no at 7 simply because there are other Tier 1 players available. Brock Bowers in this case is available. Drake May in this case is available. And so, no, I'm not taking one of these right tackles, and I am not going to take Olu Fashanu with the 7th overall pick if I am not trading back and getting, top 60 picks in return. And I know people say, well, Jared, you got to have offensive line. You need offensive line. You need this. You need that. You need. And I was listening to the midday show and something popped up in my head. And I can't even remember what their discussion was, but Derek was basically like, this team has to have a left tackle, and it doesn't matter what quarterback's available. They have to go draft a left tackle. And I think about something that Floyd said to me, years ago when you decide to draft for need, which is when you draft for need, not only are you getting a worse player, but you're going to have to play against the players that you don't draft. And I think about Jacksonville drafting Tony Baselli, number 2 overall in the 95 draft. Now, I still don't know how they did the 95 draft. I mean, I guess maybe Carolina traded out. I don't know. I wasn't, I think I was 6 years old at the time, or maybe I was even 5 years old at the time. So I can't exactly remember how that, with 2 expansion teams and everything else. But in the 95 draft, Kajana Carter went number 1 overall to Cincinnati. Then the expansion Jacksonville Jaguars took Tony Baselli at number 2. The Houston Oilers drafted Steve McNair with the 3rd overall pick. And again, let's go back to what Floyd said. If you don't draft this guy, if you don't draft the best player, you're going to have to play against him. And so I understand, as much as I would love to have a Jared Verse or a Quinyon Mitchell or one of those guys on the Titans, I understand there's a chance one of these guys is going to end up in Jacksonville or Indianapolis or something like that. But by not taking the quarterback and Jacksonville taking Baselli, they then had to play against McNair. In 1999, that is the year that got away from Jacksonville. In 1999, the Jacksonville Jaguars were 14-2 in the regular season. Ian, do you know the teams or team that beat Jacksonville twice that year?
The Titans.
The Tennessee Titans. Who quarterbacked them?
Who quarterbacked the Titans?
Yep.
McNair?
The guy they passed on. Jacksonville just annihilated the Miami Dolphins in the division round of the playoffs. It was Dan Marino's last game. They lost in the AFC Championship game to who?
Miami?
No, I'm talking about Jacksonville.
Oh,
who
the
they
Titans.
lose to the Titans. Their dream season, they went 14-2, 15-3, and they lost to Steve McNair twice. Neil O'Donnell quarterbacked once, but they lost to Steve McNair, the guy they passed on. So you have to remember that if you pass on a guy, let's use Bowers as an example. If you pass on Bowers and you have him as the 5th pick, but we got to go offensive line, Jared, and all of a sudden you draft Fuaga, who you've got ranked 13th or 14th or something like that, and a team that you play ends up getting Brock Bowers, now you have to play Bowers, and they have a better pick. And the whole point of sucking so bad last year was that you get to draft ahead of the teams that are better than you. That's the whole point of it. So, I mean, again, trade-outs I'm okay with. Now I need top 60 picks in return. I need top 60 picks and next year's firsts in return if I'm going to do this. But, no, I'm not taking a right tackle just to take a right tackle because, well, you got to have offensive line, Jared. We just don't have a choice here. Not when there are 8 elite players in this draft. Elite. 3 quarterbacks, a tight end, 2 receivers, 1 tackle, 1 pass rusher. So I'm not the right tackles in this draft, and Amarius Mims, I just keep hearing from people that hey, man, that's a project right there. That he's got talent, but his health might be a concern, and he is a project. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not taking that at 7. Even if he ends up developing because he's got the size and the athleticism and everything to be a star, I'm not taking it if it's not ready at 7. I mean, I'm taking an elite player in this draft. I did not stink last year as bad as I stunk, fired my coach, waved the white flag in October. I didn't do that to go out and pick a good player that's not going to end up being a great player when I have a pick that should allow me to pick a great player a year after I took a freaking guard with a just outside the top 10 pick. 615-737-1025. More of your phones, as always, on this program. 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in. Let's talk about Window Nation. I had Window Nation to my home, and again, I was kind of like, okay, let's see what Window Nation's all about, because I know people had been saying, hey, you really like Window Nation, and I had talked to the people at Window Nation before I started telling them or telling you about them, but I wanted to get to know Window Nation. So I had them at my home for the free in-home estimate, and they blew me away with their honesty and their expertise. They told me I didn't need to replace my windows, but they told me everything I needed to know because they know. So with April being here, if your windows won't open for fresh air or seal tight to keep out pollen and bugs, call Window Nation right now. For every 2 windows you'll buy, you'll get 2 free. So if you do it right now, you get 2 windows, you get 2 for free. Simple as that. And they've got no interest or payments for 24 months. With proven quality and affordable windows that meet or beat the national brands, you will love Window Nation. So do not miss out. Call 866-90NATION or visit windownation.com. That's 866-90NATION, windownation.com.
Titans up at 7.
Obviously, they want Joe Alt. Joe Alt is not on the board. They basically just go with the next offensive lineman on their board, which in this situation is my board and is therefore Talise Fuaga.
Now, are you going to keep Fuaga at right tackle?
Probably. I don't, they have a need of both tackles, so
Yeah.
what difference does it make?
Titans need both tackles, so I think that's fine.
They just need an upgrade on the offensive line still. They've been working on it. It's still a work in progress. It still needs help. It still needs, both tackles. If I can fix one of them, I'm a step in the right direction.
Well, they're just the first guy's gone, so I'll just take second guy. What about the other positions? Do those not count? Well, it's just so. So I thought that was Sam Monson who did the Pro Football Focus mock draft. I thought the Pro Football Focus mock draft was so insanely wild that when I first started doing it, I forgot that it was a 2-round. When I first started reading it, I forgot that it was a 2-round mock draft. And then I saw their second round pick was 38 was Peyton Wilson out of NC State. And Pro Football Focus writes, an elite athlete at linebacker, Wilson had elite tape last season, but has extensive injury history. And I'm like, an inside backer in the second round? Like, inside backer, that should be a position that you just you should be able to just get that whenever. You should be able to sign that in free agency for $7 million like Jerome Baker signed with Seattle. Like, that's what you're supposed to do that for. So, I mean, Fuaga, who might be the 17th best player in this draft and an inside backer, and I thought to myself this morning, I'm getting mad at Rand Carthon today for a mock draft that he had nothing to do with. He didn't make these picks, but I did think it was funny. It kind of reminded me of before the Titans went out. Now, again, Rand had been the one that had said that he wasn't going to spend the money and then went out and spent all the money. But it was like before free agency when I was like, you need to spend the money. Like, you need to spend it. And you guys were already making excuses ahead of time for why they weren't going to spend it. And then they spent it, and now you think they hit a grand slam in free agency. And it's like, that's how I feel about this, where I'm like, getting mad. It was just, whatever. Let's go back to your phones. Tristan's up next here on our program. Been waiting patiently. Thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead, Tristan.
Okay, why do you think Drake May is better than J.J. McCarthy? J.J. McCarthy won a national championship, and Drake May is he lost to Georgia Tech. Didn't he lose to Virginia? And
Tristan, who won the championship last year?
Joe Michigan won.
Who won before that? Who was the quarterback that won before that?
And the quarterback that won before that was Stetson Bennett.
Okay, who was the quarterback who won before that?
Look at the North Carolina quarterbacks that have come in, like Mitch Trubisky and.
What does that have to do with Drake May?
They're all from North Carolina.
So.
I'm just saying the North Carolina quarterbacks have Drake, Mitch Trubisky, and who was the other guy that was before Mitch Trubisky?
Well, you're thinking about Sam Howell, who was after that. But it should be noted that those are two, or in this case, three incredibly different people. So just because they went to college there does not mean that they're the same person.
How about if Joe Old isn't there? I would trade down again.
So your whole point about why you shouldn't draft Drake May, which again, I don't think the Titans are going to have a chance to draft Drake May. So I think this is all totally moot. But your logic is that J.J. McCarthy won the title and Drake May didn't, so you should take J.J. McCarthy. Can I make the same argument for Mac Jones? Because Mac Jones won the championship too.
His footwork is amazing. Mac Jones' footwork was that guy is not that great of a quarterback.
So now it's the footwork and it's not about the winning.
Winning and the talent, his arm strength. J.J. McCarthy can get.
If J.J. McCarthy were so talented, Tristan, why did they never let him throw the ball in college?
They allowed him to throw the ball. They just wanted to run the ball. You had to run the ball also, so they threw the ball also. So if you look some of the plays,
he threw for 60 yards.
He threw for 3,000 yards last year.
I mean, okay, and Drake May threw for 4,000. So I appreciate your call, Tristan. The idea here, like with McCarthy, here's the one thing that I just don't believe, and you'll never be able to convince me of this when it comes to J.J. McCarthy. Well, he's so good, they just didn't have to have him be good, so they didn't want him to be good. I cannot think of a quarterback in the NFL or college who was an elite quarterback, and I'm not saying like developed into an elite quarterback like Brady did down the road, but I'm talking about I can't think of a college that sat there and said, hey, we got Peyton Manning, but we could just turn around and hand the ball off 15 times or 35 times a game and win, so let's do it. Nobody does that. If you've got the quarterback, you let the quarterback throw the ball. The times that you take the ball out of the quarterback's hands are when you've got a guy like Ryan Tannehill who can do some things but can't do all the things. Like, you don't take the ball out of Mahomes' hands. I don't care how good your defense or running game is. You do not take it out of his hands. You might take it out of his hands for a half or for a game, but you don't do that for an entire season. And not only that, Jim Harbaugh is an offensive-minded coach who played quarterback. I mean, those are the guys that love to air out the ball. The quarterback gurus, the Shanahans, the McVays, the Kevin O'Connells, the Josh Heupels. Those guys, they play quarterback. They want to air it out. Sean Payton played quarterback in college. He wants to air it out. That's what. So you're telling me that this guy's so good, but Harbaugh, again, a quarterback coach, is like, no. We want to run the ball and play defense, even though we've got this super secret weapon hidden in the back cave. Come on now. I just can't get on board with that. Tommy says, if the Titans go quarterback, it will set this franchise back. I'll read the rest of his text in a second, but let me just throw a caveat into the idea of if Drake May is on the board, which I don't think Drake May will be on the board. I think Drake May is going second. But if Drake May is on the board at 7 and the Titans take Drake May at 7 and move on from Levis, you're telling me it'll set the franchise back. What if May is that dude? Like, what if May is an elite franchise quarterback? Then there's no argument that you set the Titans back. In fact, if anything, you sped it up. It's like, wow, you were in a stage where you were wondering if you had the quarterback, maybe he can do it, maybe he can't. And now we got the guy. That's where the Houston Texans are. They used a high pick on Davis Mills. I believe, Ian, Davis Mills was a second-round pick. He might have been a third-round pick.
I want to say third.
Okay. Davis Mills was a high pick. And they could have said, well, Davis Mills, quarterback, we got instead, they drafted C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud pretty good. Tommy continues, Levis has the second-round contract, which allows us to spend more money, not to mention 3 years in a row for the Titans to go quarterback is absolutely absurd. We need to build this team and give Levis time before jumping the gun like that. If we draft Drake May, I'll be pissed when you have Bowers or Alt possibly available. So, again, if you don't like Drake May, that's fine. Then that's the reason why you don't like it, because you don't like Drake May, which is a different discussion. If you're just saying, we can't go quarterback, well, that's how you end up drafting Corey Davis ahead of Patrick Mahomes. That's how you do it. Because you thought you had a franchise quarterback and you didn't. And that's what a lot of you want to accept is, well, we think we have a franchise quarterback, which I don't think you have a franchise quarterback. I think we'll see if you have a franchise quarterback. I would say you have a starting quarterback. You think you maybe have a franchise quarterback. We'll see. I'm not going to pass up on a guy if my quarterback guru head coach is like, man, this guy coming out, this guy reminds me of Burrow. If I'm getting that out of Brian Callahan, I'm supposed to pass on him because I got Will Levis? No, sir. Chuck says, why are you hating so much on J.J. McCarthy? We're looking at offensive line help. It doesn't make much sense. I mean, the texter or caller called in about J.J. McCarthy. I mean, I want J.J. McCarthy to go in the top 6 because then it pushes one of the elite 8 players in this draft to you. But, I mean, just this idea, I feel like that everybody's perpetuating that, no. J.J. McCarthy actually is a good player. They just chose not to use him. And because of that, that's why, like, to me, that's the difference. I also, for the whole crowd out there that's like anti-taking anything but an offensive lineman, which I get. I mean, I want him to take Joe Alt. But for the crowd that's anti them taking anything but an offensive lineman, aren't you the same people that think that Bill Callahan can coach up Jalen Duncan? Because you love your team so much and believe that everybody's right all the time? I mean, so you can't have it both ways there, right? Texture says, if you draft a quarterback in the first round, do you fix the offensive line in the remainder of the draft? So remember what Mark Dominic said, that if he took Brock Bowers at 7, he would use the 4th-round pick to go with the 2nd-round pick to move up and take a tackle. Now, I don't know if he thinks that's going to get him into the first round. He would know that stuff better than I would. But he would use the 4th-round pick to move up at 2 in order to get a tackle, and then he'd roll with PT. Now, what I would do is I would sign Andrus Peat. And I would sign Andrus Peat if I end up not going with the tackle, and he would be starting at tackle for me. And I know you'll say, but Jared, we need a long-term solution at left tackle. I agree. But I'm not sacrificing a better player, like an elite star player, because I just want to have a young tackle available, even if I'm not as high on the young tackle as I am the elite player that's out there. And in this case, that would be May, and I think May is an elite quarterback prospect. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Chris Sanders will join us as he always does on this program. FanDuel Sportsbook is my official sportsbook app. The NBA play-in tournament is here. It gives teams a chance to play their way into the postseason. Congratulations to the Lakers. What happened to Golden State? Woo! So it only seems right that new customers on FanDuel can play their way into $150. Just place any $5 bet and you'll get $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, to use during the NBA playoffs. 3-pointers made in a game, over-under point total, first basket scorer, and more. Just go to FanDuel.com/JGM to get started. That's FanDuel.com/JGM. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 and over in present Tennessee. First online real money wager, only $10 first deposit required. Bonus issue is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after a seat. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. Join National Super Speedway in the city of Lebanon for the Speedway on the Square this Saturday from 1 to 6 in downtown Lebanon. Stop by and bring the family for a day filled with inflatables, face painting, balloon art, live music, and a ticket giveaway to the Ally 400 NASCAR Cup Series race at 3:30. Chris Sanders is with us, former Titans receiver. He'll be with us for another edition of Draft Night in Nashville a week from tomorrow.
Oh,
Chris, I want to start with this.
Yes.
Let's take Joe Alt out of the equation for
God,
right now.
yes.
Let's say he's off the board.
Sure.
Do the Titans still have to take an offensive lineman in the first round, or could the Titans take one of these other highly ranked players with the 7th pick?
I don't know, Jared. That's a great question because if you look at the offensive line prospects in this draft, I mean, there's some good guys. It's not just Joe Alt. I mean, it's the guy from Penn State, Fasciano. Then you got the guy from Oregon State, Fiago. I hate to pronounce his name wrong. But then you got the guy from Alabama, Latham. You got Mims from Georgia. So you do have a lot of guys that can play the position. But I just kind of look at the scenario that even if you have some good offensive tackles there, what if you got Neighbors sitting there? What if you got Adunzu standing there? And also you have some other guys that's kind of sitting in that position. It just makes you wonder what the Tennessee Titans are going to do.
Man, you're like Mad Dog Russo with those names. But at least you're close. I do wonder this question.
Wow, man, it's crazy.
There is something to that. I do wonder this, though.
Sure.
You know, Mark Dominic, the former Buccaneers general manager, said he thinks taking Brock Bowers, the tight end out of Georgia, is a slam dunk, says he would do it over Joe Alt, thinks that Bowers is that kind of matchup nightmare. Put your coaching shoes on in this one. If you were to take a player like Bowers, could he do enough for the Titans offensively from a matchup standpoint for defenses that it would offset the gain that you're not making in your offensive line?
I mean, it will. I mean, this guy is a rare talent. I mean, just watching what he does. I know he plays a little bit of tight end, but you can flank him out and him go against defensive backs. I just love the skill set he has. And he kind of – the one thing I love that he does well is he runs routes just like a wide receiver. And the one thing that he does well also is his yards after the catch. But in this situation, this is just my opinion. People may think I'm wrong, but why would you go and get him when you have Chig? I mean, I understand.
Chig
he's
sucks.
Okay, how many receptions did he have last year?
I don't know, but he dropped the ball just as many times as he caught it.
Time out. 54 receptions, 578. That's not bad. I mean, I know you look at some of his drops, and the reason why I say that is I'm not saying that Chig is a better player than Bowers. I'm just saying that if Brian Callahan uses Chig in a great way to get where he puts the matchups to where Chig can excel, I think he can be a asset to this team also.
See, I think Chig belongs as the number 2 tight end
But
in
why?
that pass catch because I think he stinks.
How? 54 receptions, 578?
He can't catch. He cannot catch.
Listen.
Like there was one ball, I want to say it was Tampa Bay, where he not only dropped it, but then it fell to the ground and he kicked it forward. Like I've never seen that before. He's got
54
stone
receptions,
hands.
578.
Wow. I mean, that's really, 500 yards.
I'm not saying he's just as good as Bowers, but he has a skill set that I think that is still a matchup nightmare for defense. He can run. I know he needs to work on his catch just a little bit more, but that's just a confidence issue. And it's kind of like, I'm not trying to get off the subject, it's kind of like Burks. Burks is a talent. There's something that the Tennessee Titans saw in him that makes you think that there's some potential still there. And I'm just looking at Chig. Everybody's just kind of looking over Chig. Chig can make some plays now. I watched him last year when I went to Cap a couple of times. If he just consistently gets his hands better and gets a little bit of confidence, I'm telling you, in my opinion, I think he can be one of the best tight ends in the league.
Yeah, see, I got into the whole Chig thing last year. I saw him in training camp. I drank the Kool-Aid, and I was just so underwhelmed. I mean, to me, Chig is a backup. And when you draft a guy in the 4th round –
578.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's going to catch the ball when there's nobody else to catch it. They're going to have to throw it to somebody. But, I mean, again, I thought Chig last year, I really thought Chig, because Chig had a good rookie year. I thought Chig was ready to really show that he was going to be, and he just sucked last year. I mean, everything was worse than it was the year before. I mean, he dropped the ball. He dropped the ball 10% of the time last year, Chris.
54 receptions.
He had 6 drops. He dropped the ball 10% of the time.
54.
You're asking me why I would take Brock Bowers. I'm thinking because he can catch.
I'm just saying, if Brian Callahan comes in here and uses his skill set, he gets confidence early, this guy can make plays now. I'm not saying he's a
you're
world beater.
looking at, in my opinion, Chris, you're looking at, the best case scenario here. If Brian Callahan coach him up, and if this guy can get his confidence up, and if he can this, and if he can, and I'm not worried about best case scenario. I'm worried about what he is right now. And what he was last year was not good enough as a starting tight end in the NFL. Pro Football Focus ranked him 32nd. And what that means is that if you're going to say he's a starter, he's the dead last one in the NFL.
54 receptions, 578.
Why do I care about that?
Because he's making plays. Listen, Jared, I love you and I respect what you say, but you can't just give up on a person because he drops a couple of balls.
I mean, I gave him an entire season, and he got me 54 catches.
Okay. Name some more tight ends that had more catches than him.
All right, let's pull it up. Let's right now
Sure.
pull up how many people had 54 catches last year.
Tight ends, not receivers. Tight ends.
Okay, let's see. It just gives you the total catches here.
Okay.
So let's go to 54 because apparently Breece Hall, the running back from the Jets, had 76 catches.
I'm talking about
So
tight
let's
ends.
see. We get to 54. Hold on, I got to scroll all the way down. Let's see.
Are you a jerk?
Jameer Gibbs had 52. Joe Mixon had 52. Tajay Spears had 52. Darren Waller, who was a disaster last year for the Giants, and might retire. Running back. Running back is supposed to run the ball before they catch it. And he's catching it as much as a running back. Oh, hold on. Here you go. Logan Thomas, who got cut by Washington and was a converted quarterback, had 55 catches.
Different schemes.
Okay. I just keep making excuses for him, Chris. You'll never win if you just take the bad players and you keep saying, you know what? This year the bad player is going to be good.
Jared, bad players? A bad player is not, first of all, number one, is not going to play in the NFL. A bad player is not going to catch 54 catches, 578.
You know Jonnu Smith had more receiving yards last year?
Jonnu Smith? But he's a good player.
No, that's why Miami signed him for almost no money.
Oh, my God.
That's why he gets cut by every team. Signed his big contract. New England didn't want him anymore. Goes to Atlanta. They didn't want him anymore. And now he's on like a low-end contract. That's backup stuff, Chris.
Talking about?
What's what I'm talking about? You want to pump it. You're telling me not to draft Brock Bowers because you want a backup to be a backup.
Not a backup, but I'm saying I would get another player in that position. You still got a guy that athletic-wise can still make plays. All he has to do is work on a couple of things, and he could be an elite tight end. I'm telling you, I saw it in practice. Listen, everybody gets caught. Oh, he dropped a couple of balls. Yeah, I understand. The best wide receiver dropped a lot of balls. Let me give you a perfect example. Jerry Rice is the best receiver of all times, right or wrong? Yes or no?
Are you comparing Chig to Jerry Rice?
No, listen to what I'm saying. Yes or no?
Yes, Jerry Rice is the best receiver of all time.
Thank you. But his first couple of years, he struggled catching the football.
Did Jerry Rice drop the ball 10% of the time?
His first year he did.
Did he?
Yes, his first year.
I mean, I wasn't alive when Jerry Rice's first year, so I'll have to take your word for it. But I highly doubt Jerry Rice dropped the ball 10% of the time.
You're looking at the finished product. But at the beginning, when he did, he struggled.
Jerry Rice was a first-round draft choice. I highly doubt he dropped the ball 10% of the time.
Jared, he struggled. So what I'm telling you is the team saw the potential there. What I'm saying about Chig is I'm not comparing him to Brock Bowers. I'm not comparing him. That's not what I'm saying. And if they get him, I think it's going to be an asset for this team. But what I'm saying is don't give up on a guy that has the potential to be a great tight end in this league. That's what I'm saying.
Jerry Rice had 927 yards as a rookie.
And he had a lot of drops.
They did not keep that as a stat back then.
I know, but he had a lot of drops.
He led the NFL. So Chig is coming off of year 2. Jerry Rice led the NFL in receiving yards and touchdowns and yards per game as a second-year pro and was an all-pro.
But what if they would have gave up on him his first year and said he's done?
Well, I'm not giving up on Chig after his first year. I'm giving up on Chig after his second year. I mean, look, I gave Chig the chance last year. I thought Chig was going to make it. I really did. I thought Chig was going to make it, and he was incredibly disappointing this past year, and there's no way around it. And so I understand the idea of not taking Brock Bowers because of Joe Alt or because of whomever, but I do not understand the idea of not taking Brock Bowers because of Chig.
No, that see, I didn't say that. That's totally different. What I said, you said if they did draft him, and I was saying why they shouldn't draft him. That's kind of what I was saying. But if they draft him, it's going to be an asset for the team. But regardless, whoever's there, let's go back to the tackle position. Whoever's at the tackle position, they got to make sure they protect Will Levis. So at the end of the day, they're going to get Joe Alt or one of those tackles that we're talking about.
Last one for you, Chris Sanders with us.
Yes.
Do you expect a patented Jared Stillman meltdown on draft night?
1,000%. 1,000%.
My favorite is last year.
Oh, my God.
Last year when they took Skoronski, you took your phone out and took a video as I went crazy about the fact that they drafted a guard.
Oh, no, when they got Raiders that year, dude.
I went crazy about that.
It's the best. That's why I love doing the show, because I know there's going to be a Jared breakdown. And guess what? I'm going to have my camera ready.
There you go, Chris Sanders. We will see you then, and of
Love
course we'll
you,
talk to you
brother.
before then.
Appreciate you,
Love
man.
you too, Chris
Love you too.
Sanders.
Bye-bye.
The president of the Chig Okonkwo deserves a third chance fan club here on the program. Again, I'll have to take Chris's word for it because I was not alive in 1985, but I assume Jerry Rice did not drop the ball 10% of the time on his 49 catches for 927 as a rookie in 1985. 615-737-1025. So, I love Chris. I'm not throwing him under the bus, I promise. But I think that Chig thing was a good example of let's think best case scenario. Why can't best case scenario happen? And I'm worried that a lot of Titan fans feel that way about their quarterback. And after yesterday's discussion, it made me worried about something that affects him. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Very lively conversation with Chris Sanders. You know I love him. But I am a little worried. You know, when he's telling me that I don't need to draft Brock Bowers because I've got Chig Okonkwo, I worry about toxic positivity. Ian, are you familiar with toxic positivity?
A little, yeah.
It is a thing when you are so positive that you basically ignore reality. And after yesterday's conversation on this program about if Drake May were to fall to 7, and if I said I would take him and try to trade Levis, I was so disappointed by how many Titan fans were so gung-ho about texting into this show or calling into this show and saying that, you know, why would we do that, Jared? Will Levis is a franchise quarterback. And I'm like, what? He's what? A franchise quarterback? You have seen the over-under win totals for this team, right? I think it's 5.5. Vegas is telling you they think Will Levis sucks. Now, I don't think Will Levis sucks, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if Levis is going to make it, and I don't know if Levis is going to fail. This time last year, I knew Malik Willis wasn't going to make it. But then it takes me to the actual people who matter in this equation, not just the coach and the owner and things like that, but it makes me think about the player. Because Titans Twitter can be a very disillusioned place. And I know you guys will say, well, Twitter's not everything and social media doesn't reflect reality. And these kids today, and Levis is a kid. When I sat down with him at the Super Bowl, my biggest takeaway was like, man, this kid, he's a baby. You know, I used to be a young guy, and now I'm a middle-aged guy, and he is a child. These kids read social media, and you know Levis does. And I fear that Will Levis is living in the Titan fan optimistic reality where he thinks he's actually accomplished something in the NFL. And the owner does no favors when she talks him up. And the idea of the fan, oh, he's our guy. He's a franchise quarterback. He hasn't done anything in the NFL. You know, the best kind of guys are the guys that are driven by the fear of failure. Nick Saban never, ever, ever talks about all the national championships he's won. That was never his mentality. He's always worried about the next. I read a book about Nick Saban that after LSU won the national title when he was the head coach, he went up to Matt Mock, the then quarterback, in the locker room and said, are you coming back next year or are you going to the draft? He had already moved on. And I'm not saying that's a way to live if you want to be happy, but that is a way to live if you want to be successful. The old saying with Tom Brady, which Super Bowl was his favorite? The next one. But when it comes to Will Levis, I understand the idea of having confidence that you could do it, and that's great. And I understand the idea of saying, hey, my team supports me, that's great. But I think there's a difference between having confidence that you can perform in the NFL and thinking that you've arrived. Because Will Levis hasn't done that. He's 3-6 as a starting quarterback. He got injured twice. He lost to Kenny Pickett and a JV Texans team. Okay? Like, that's his resume right now in the NFL. And I'm not saying that means he's going to be bad. Peyton Manning was 3-13 as a rookie. I'm not saying that means he's going to be bad. I'm just saying that means he hasn't arrived. And I know that. And everybody with a brain knows that. But Titans Twitter thinks Will Levis is on his way to superstardom. And if Will Levis thinks that that's true, and if Will Levis thinks, oh, no, the owner thinks I'm a franchise quarterback. You know, I heard him do a podcast, and he talked about, you know, this offseason, it's my team. And it's like, dude, like, you need to be afraid of what happens if you don't do well this year. Because every single person outside of Nashville thinks Will Levis sucks. And I don't think that's fair by any stretch of the imagination. But that is what they think. And so, look, everything that happened last year, there were a lot of positives. There were a lot of negatives. That's going to happen for the most part with a rookie quarterback. Some of those negatives could have been somebody else's fault. Vrabel, Tim Kelly, drafting a guard with the 11th pick, whatever. But just knowing how the young kids are today, just knowing how much they read that social media stuff, knowing the phone calls we took on the show yesterday, the texts I got, Twitter. How could you possibly think about taking Drake May, a guy who, by almost all of these gurus, is the second best prospect in this draft? How could you possibly think about taking Drake May when you've got the great Will Levis as your quarterback? Like, you mean the great Will Levis that you didn't even think was so great? You drafted a guard before you drafted him. And it would not surprise me if Levis's head resided in the same space that is the Titans social media echo chamber of, he's a franchise quarterback, Jared, let Rand cook. It would not surprise me if his head lived there. And I'm praying it does not. I'm praying his head lives in the space where all he thinks about is how every team in the NFL, including the one he's on, told him this time last year, we don't think you're very good. That is where I hope his head lives. And I don't know where it lives or where it doesn't, but I'm worried that this echo chamber of positivity is going to give him a false sense of security or a false sense of accomplishment. 615-737-1025. We will get to your phones at 615-737-1025. Meanwhile, Kaharski was yelling and screaming. I mean, just yelling today about, again, we're just going over draft situations and what happens if Drake May, a guy who most people think is the number 2 quarterback in this class, number 2 player maybe in this class, about what happens if he falls. He was yelling and screaming. We'll get to the yelling and screaming, and we'll do that next. 615-737-1025, Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
Do you run the risk of passing on the next Patrick Mahomes? Yes. But you can't draft, no matter what everybody says, you can't draft quarterback 3 years in a row when you have trading up twice, when you're in desperation for other positions that any quarterback is going to need, be it Drake May or Will Levis. You have to get a left tackle. You have to get a wide receiver. You have to get an edge rusher. You have to get all these other things. And it's ridiculous to think. You have to cycle.
Unless you're, well, I agree with you, unless you believe he's a sure thing.
Right. And then Caroline said, well, then you trade Levis. I mean, she falls into this thing like, well, everybody wants the guy that you no longer want. I mean, so you turn the guy that you traded for big resources. You spend a second, you traded, I don't remember what, your second and this year's third, and you trade him for a fourth or a fifth. Nobody's interested in Will Levis anymore. They've moved on to this year's quarterback class.
That was PK this morning yelling and screaming about yesterday's topic of if Drake May falls to the Titans at 7, do you take him? I say yes. If you Brian Callahan likes him, you take him. And PK saying that you can't draft Drake May because no team is allowed to draft a quarterback 3 years in a row. Says who? I mean, I didn't look up the bylaws this morning, but I have a pretty good feeling that you're allowed to draft a quarterback 3 years in a row if you want to do it. And it's okay to say, hey, we like the guy we have now, but we love this guy. Isn't that what you want your team to do? Well, we got a guy here, but we can get a better guy. Go get the better guy, right? And when it comes to quarterback, when you pick one of these guys, you're putting your career on that guy, especially if you're a general manager. If you're a head coach, you might get a second shot. Brian Callahan might get fired, go be an offensive coordinator somewhere else, and get a second chance. GMs, I mean, there was no second shot for Floyd Reese, and he was a pretty good one. So I have two thoughts here. Number one, there's the trade that Paul's saying, okay, you take May and then you trade Levis and nobody's going to want Levis, so you're not going to get as good of a pick in return. So is the goal here to win football games or is the goal to manage your assets the best? Because if the goal is to manage your assets the best, then maybe, okay, well, we use this pick for this and we use this for this. If the goal is to win football games, the point is, can you find a franchise quarterback? That's the question. So I think, just given the state of the league, you could get a second rounder in next year's draft for Will Levis. I really do. Because once the first four quarterbacks go, after that, there's going to be teams that want a young quarterback that don't have a young quarterback that might trade you next year's second, a 25 second, in order to go with Levis. Denver is the team that stands out to me the most. But let's say that Paul's right, and Levis goes for a fifth rounder. Let's just use that. Then in order to get Drake May, when you factor in Will Levis and the losing that Will Levis had to do in order for you to be able to get the pick that would allow you to get Drake May, you would have spent a first, a second, and a third for Drake May and a fifth, right? Levis was a second and a third, and you did flop spots, I think, in the third last year. I think you traded down in the third and swapped with Arizona or whoever it was you made the trade with. But a first, a second, a third for your quarterback and a fifth. Now, let's say Drake May is a franchise quarterback, which a lot of people seem to think that he's going to be. And I'm not just saying like the Mel Kipers. I'm talking about the guys that have actually done this before. Mark Dominic has him ahead of Jaden Daniels. Rick Spielman has him ahead of Jaden Daniels. I saw there was a scout, or an AFC national scout that did a mock draft for ESPN, or they use scouts to do this mock draft at ESPN today, and they have May going second. So, again, these guys think that Drake May's legit. So, you give up a first, a second, a third for May and a fifth. Well, Patrick Mahomes was 2 first-rounders and a third. And I got to tell you, a 1, and a 3, as opposed to a 1, a 2, and a 3 is a much steeper price to pay. And yet, I don't think anybody in Kansas City misses their 2018 first rounder or 2017 third rounder that they didn't have because they spent it on Patrick Mahomes. And then when it comes to, well, you can't pick a quarterback 3 years in a row, why are Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan held accountable for the Malik Willis pick? They didn't make it. Brian Callahan has nothing to do with Malik Willis. The reason that Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon are here is because the people that made that pick aren't here anymore. And you could argue it was for making that pick, I guess. All that matters in the NFL. Now, look, there's multiple ways to skin a cat, and you can win with a good team and an average quarterback, and maybe you can only win so far. But as far as consistently getting into the playoffs and being a perennial contender, the most important thing, and you all know this, is to have a blue chip quarterback, a franchise guy. That's what this is all about, right? Well, if that's the case, all that matters is that you get the QB. When you tell me, well, you used the pick on a QB, you're talking about a QB. See, you can live with a tight end. Well, we didn't have a tight end. We went out in free agency. We signed C.J. Uzama, a tight end. A right tackle, Jermaine Illuminor. A cornerback. But when it comes to quarterback, you need the quarterback. And I don't care what you have to pay in order to get it. If you've got the quarterback, you've got a shot. And that's what this is all about again. So I hate this whole lecture of oh, well, you can't do that. Okay, well, congratulations. And again, this is if May's that guy, if Brian Callahan's evaluated it and Brian Callahan thinks May's that guy, you do not pass. If you've got the opportunity to get the quarterback, you do not pass on it. That's why he makes millions of dollars. Brian Callahan does now. Makes a lot more money than he made in Cincinnati. This is why. So that you can look at these things, evaluate them, and say, okay, I can coach this guy up. I can make him into a star. And then we've got our quarterback, and we don't have to worry about anything for the next 15 years. That's why you do this. So this idea of oh, no, they used a second and a third last year. Can't go do that. Okay, and Andy Reid wanted to draft Paxton Lynch in 2016 and wasn't able to do it. He drafted Mahomes in 17. Now, let's just say Andy Reid had drafted Paxton Lynch in 2016. Think it would have been a bad idea to draft Mahomes in 17? Or would you rather have Mahomes? I think I'd rather have had Mahomes. So, I get the idea of, oh, yeah, this, you got the quarterback this, you got the, you've got a quarterback. Right, you've got a quarterback. We don't know if he's going to be a good quarterback. He's just a quarterback. If your evaluation says this guy at the top of the draft, he's going to be the quarterback, you take him. And to me, that's simple. 615-737-1025. I see your phones. We're to them. 615-737-1025 here on Stillman and Company. 1025, 1063 The Game.
I have Drake May an ounce in front of Jaden Daniels.
Okay.
It's really, really tough. This is also without me having a chance to spend time with him. But you're going to have to make an opinion. If I were to have to make an opinion, that's what I would be. Is I would have Drake May just barely above him, even though I love Jaden Daniels. But if you want, the Jaden Daniels type of offense in terms of moving the ball and running the ball around with your quarterback, that's great. And I think you obviously are going to get success there. The only thing with Drake for me a little bit is when I look around Jaden Daniels' skill set around him, it's phenomenal.
Yep.
Drake's isn't at the same par. And I know there's times where you watch Drake May and you're like, what was that? So it's not like, then you look at Drake May and go, well, who did he beat? There are easy things to kind of knock down. Every player has faults. And the thing you've got to really kind of look at is what do you like? And I look at trying to predict it. And I think Jaden probably goes 2. And I think because I think of what Cliff Kingsbury's worked with. And I think Alex Van Pelt is more with New England, has more of the Drake May type of quarterbacks in his history. So that's where I think those two fall.
There you go. That was Mark Dominic on SiriusXM NFL Radio. He's got May 2nd. And then says, well, I think Kingsbury will go with Daniels, but, he's got him ahead. And Rick Spielman basically said the same thing. But nope, you guys are good. Will Levis, don't need any good quarterbacks. Don't even need to entertain the idea. It's impossible. By the way, having a quarterback is not a marriage. Like, a marriage is supposed to be about love and, the partnership and everything else. Quarterback is a transactional relationship. I'm drafting you to quarterback my team to win me games. And then when you win me games, I am going to give you $50 to $60 million a year in order to do it. That is transactional. Lamar Jackson wanted a trade because he wasn't getting his money. Does that mean that Lamar doesn't have respect for the Ravens? Or does it mean that this is a job and Lamar wants to be compensated for it? Well, that's what you're doing. You're finding the guy that can win you the games the most, and then you're paying them. And so if you think that there's somebody out there that can win more games for you than the guy you have, you take them. Because if you don't, somebody else will, and then they'll win the games that you want to win yourself. Let's go to your phones, which is driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Dylan in Antioch's up next here on the program. Thank you for calling. Working on his fastball, I assume. Go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah, man, I was trying. I never played baseball. I couldn't dunk you, but it was a good attempt. But, yeah, I hope you guys get the draft show. I hope the NHL doesn't screw you guys over because it was awesome. Mark Howard was great on that.
R.I.P.
So, R.I.P. So I don't think the Titans are in the quarterback market, and I'm not saying that Will Levis is the answer. Like, I don't know if he is or not. I think he has potential, but it seems like Amy really, really likes Will Levis. And she's kind of crazy like her dad, like Bud Adams. They have the same DNA, and I don't know. She fires people, hires people all the time. So who knows what's going to happen? But I don't feel like that's a thing. And this is the take that's probably going to really make you mad. I would rather have Fuaga than Brock Bowers. I don't think you can't take a tight end that high at 7. Like, you got to shore up that offensive line, and that's just how I feel about it. No,
again,
go ahead.
I mean, and Dylan, I appreciate your call. If you want to take the 13th or 16th or whatever best player in the draft at the 7th pick, that's your business. I don't. So I can't take Fuaga over Brock Bowers if Brock Bowers is, as I believe Rick Spielman has it, I think he has him as the 7th best player in the draft. I cannot take the 16th best player. I cannot take a guy who does not project to be a Pro Bowler over a guy who does project to be a Pro Bowler. And I will use the example of Jeffrey Simmons. The Titans needed a right guard when they went into the 2019 draft. They didn't need a defensive tackle. They had Jarrell Casey. They drafted Simmons. Do you regret that decision? The Titans didn't need a wide receiver. They drafted A.J. Brown. So nobody cares what your need was years ago. But, again, you cannot take, a worse player with a good pick. On the front about the Titans not being in the quarterback market, shouldn't the Titans be in the market for every position every year? Like, isn't that what upgrading your roster is? If we were to do this, you wouldn't have Tony Pollard, right? Because it'd just be like, we have a running back. We're not interested in any of the other running backs. I mean, shouldn't you want to upgrade your roster all the time? I get the idea of Buffalo not being in the quarterback market or Kansas City or Baltimore not being in the quarterback market, but you're not Kansas City and Baltimore. So this idea of like, oh, yeah, I heard Paul say this today. The Titans aren't doing any homework on quarterbacks. Well, shame on them because they're paid to do the work at every position. Not, oh, yeah, we'll take this one off. That's not how this works. And that's how you end up drafting Solomon Thomas, 3rd overall, when you need a quarterback and Patrick Mahomes goes in the same draft. San Francisco's starting quarterback to begin the 2017 season was Brian Hoyer. The report is that San Francisco didn't do any research on the quarterbacks going into the draft. They had the second pick. They didn't do any research going into the draft on the quarterbacks because they just thought they were going to sign Kirk Cousins at the end of the year. Mahomes went in that draft. Frankie is up next here on our program, has been waiting patiently on Drake May. Thank you for calling. Go ahead, Frankie.
My pleasure. I've studied these drafts for a long time, and it's kind of silly to me to think that the Titans could even have a chance at Drake May based on he's going to go 3, and Minnesota's probably going to trade up and give up 3 number ones. So if you're talking about the Titans for 2 days trying to get Drake May, then you probably better talk about them giving up 5 or 6 years of drafting a quarterback because that's the compensation it's going to get to a guy of that level. And for that sake, if you're Minnesota, it's an absolute steal if you get a franchise quarterback for those 3 ones, and it's a bust if he can't play. It all comes down to your scouting and whether you think the guy can play. And you think he can play, then you better start giving up some ones to jump in front of Minnesota on the 3 ones they're ready to give up.
Well, Minnesota has to jump in front of you, so it's not like you'd have to give
they've
more
already
than Minnesota because you're
they've
ahead of Minnesota. But I hear what you're saying. And
they've
so
collected that one.
I hear what you're saying. Thank you for your call. I agree with 95% of what you said. I mean, to be honest with you, I think Drake May's going with the second pick. I think that Washington is going to draft Drake May. And I agree. I think the whole idea of this discussion is moot because May won't be there. But again, these are the discussions that teams are having. Because while it'd be very easy for us to say, well, he won't be there, nobody thought Will Levis was going to be in the second round last year, including me. Nobody thought that. And so teams have to be prepared so that they don't end up on the clock trying to figure out, oh, well, we didn't prepare for this possibility. What do we do now? Again, that's what stupid teams do. That's like Paul again saying today, this team hasn't done any homework on quarterbacks. I hope he's wrong because if they haven't done any work on quarterbacks, it confirms what I feel about this front office, which is they don't know what they're doing. You got to be doing the work on them all. It'd be crazy not to, unless you're Kansas City, and you're not Kansas City. Glenn texts in and says, Levis beat Tua in a fourth quarter comeback. Does he not get credit for that? So I looked it up. You want to know how many wins Will Levis has as a starting quarterback as a rookie in the NFL? 3. You want to know how many fourth quarter comebacks Vince Young had as a rookie? 4. So if we want to anoint Levis the greatest quarterback of all time because of a fourth quarter comeback against Miami, let's not forget, that Vince Young did that 4 times. 4 fourth quarter comebacks for a guy who I have a hard time calling Vince Young a quote unquote bust, only because how many busts make the Pro Bowl twice? Will Texan, it says, if I remember correctly, Callahan spoke at length about the difficulty of tracking 3 receivers for defenses. It's something he brought up in regard to Peyton Manning. In your opinion, is Bowers someone that can fit that mold? Certainly Neighbors or Adunze could. How much should we look at touchdown scorers with that in mind? I think one thing that I haven't done a very good job of is I haven't done a very good job of talking about what happens if Joe Alt's not there. Because then I think it does, then it would lend itself to it being much more likely that the Titans will draft a touchdown scorer. I absolutely think that the receiver is an area of need for the team. I mean, you signed Calvin Ridley. Great. Calvin Ridley's like 30 years old. DeAndre Hopkins is well over 30 years old. Receivers absolutely a need for this team. And it would not surprise me if the Titans ended up, say, Alt's off the board, going in the direction of receiver or Bowers. I think that to sit there and say, like, oh, no, they don't need a receiver. I mean, at that point, like, now you're trusting in Traylon Burks or Nick Westbrook-Akine. And it's like I was telling Chris Sanders when Chris Sanders was yelling and screaming about how Chig is a good tight end, which I don't believe. But it goes back to this idea that I have that is, if you want to keep giving chances to guys that have proven incapable of handling what it is that you want them to do, chances are, it's not for sure, but chances are, I would argue, that it is more likely than not that they're not going to be able to do that. So if you're like, well, you know what, we're okay with Chig at tight end and Burks and Nick Westbrook-Akine in the slot, you're probably going to get the same results that you've gotten over the years with Nick Westbrook-Akine, Chig, Burks, Kyle Phillips, all those same old Scarbinis. Like, you're probably going to get the same results. I'd be shocked if you got better results. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Brian Callahan can make some of these players better than they were, a little bit better, but again, not better than we don't need a receiver. I mean, that is a humongous leap. 615-737-1025. More your phones. 615-737-1025. Plus, how do I say this right? It's a vibe. I think that's what I'll say. A vibe. Word on the street. It's a vibe. We'll use vibe. It's a vibe I'm getting about a potential move that could affect the Titans roster. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Thoughts on the tackle market? What are your thoughts on?
No, they're still good players. Players that have played, a ton of snaps in this league, but, not to get too far ahead, but this tackle draft class is pretty deep. And so we're going to, like we always do, we're going to find the best option for us, and hopefully we make the right decision.
Hey, that was Rand Carthon, and so I will just say this. I think vibe's the right way to say this. A couple guys are texting into the text line about Andrus Peat and the Titans, saying, like, Jared, what about Andrus Peat? If we don't end up getting Alt, what about Andrus Peat? I get the vibe that Andrus Peat, the former left tackle of the Saints, he's a left side of the line player, he's played left tackle, left guard. I get the vibe that there is some smoke to the Andrus Peat talk from earlier when he visited the team at the beginning of free agency. Now, the expectation, and I think I've done some digging, so that I'm not just hearing one side of this, but the expectation is that Pete will probably sign after the draft. And the expectation I also heard is that Pete is not the only tackle that the Titans are looking at. So that there are free agent tackles that are out there. I don't know who, but that the Titans are looking at free agent tackles. And that could be, I don't know if that is, they don't draft Joe Alt, then they sign Andrus Peat, or they sign this other guy, or what. I have no idea. I get the vibe that is still very much alive. And that if the Titans end up not drafting Joe Alt, it would shock me if the Titans don't end up signing Andrus Peat. Now, again, I was told that it's more likely than not that Pete is probably going to sign after the draft. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Titans end up making a move on a tackle after the draft, a la Chris Hubbard last year. That being said, I would sign Pete now if I were the Titans. Now, if I was Pete, might have to lower the asking price a little bit, but I would sign him now because if worst case scenario, you sign Andrus Peat and you draft Joe Alt, and then you can move Pete to the right side and try him out there. Or if Nicholas Petit Frere, a.k.a. PT, wins the RT job, then you've got a backup swing tackle guard kind of thing that's not some Scarbini bum, that's a guy that's actually played in the NFL. So that's what I would do. But again, I know that, we haven't heard much on that front. And I just think that there is some truth or, some meat on the bone to the Andrus Peat thing. That there could be, after the draft, a signing with him and the Titans. And that the Titans also are looking at other tackle free agents that they could bring in here. Let's go to Kyle, who's up next here on our program. If Joe Alt is not there, Kyle, thank you for calling and waiting. Go ahead.
Well, you stole my thunder. Everything you just said, I was seriously about to say. So I like Pete. I don't know a whole lot about him, but he's just more of a old school one-quarter. So I don't think it.
Okay, I'm gonna
think right tackle.
All right, say that again.
I said that makes me think he would be a better right tackle rather than left tackle. But
well, Pete's never played on the right side of the line in the NFL.
Yeah, I know, but a veteran like him, I'm sure he could play some right guard if he had to, because our right guard situation isn't fixed yet either. So, like you said, swing tackle, guard, either way.
Well, he's not a guard. I mean, he's a left guard. I appreciate your call. He's a left side of the line player, right? Like he's his entire career, he's been a left tackle, left guard. So that's what he is. And so to me, it's like, he's your third tackle. And if something happens to your right tackle, I did talk to somebody who told me that a coach of a team thinks that Alt could move to the right side. Maybe if that happens, you move Alt to the right side and you put Pete at left tackle, or maybe Pete can play the right side. I know that when Pete came for a visit, they were looking at him as a swing tackle. So maybe he can play the right side. I would like to see that done ahead of time. But again, the vibe I'm getting is that there still is very much some smoke surrounding the situation. Craig says, all last year I had to hear you cry, we need a left tackle, we need a left tackle. The Titans are now in a great position to get a prominent left tackle, but when it comes time to go shopping, you want to buy the pretty shiny dress instead of the heavy-duty shoes for stability. So wishy-washy. And then some real sexist comments in there. I'll say this to Craig's take. Quarterback is the most important position in the NFL. Quarterback. In fact, Ian, if you could, Bill Polian was on SiriusXM NFL Radio. And again, I think tackle's important too. I think a tackle is important. And the Titans right now don't have starters. But Bill Polian was talking about what general managers look for in the top 10. You know, for you guys out there last year that didn't think it was absolutely absurd for the Titans to draft a guard at 11, Bill Polian was on SiriusXM NFL Radio. Ian, if we got it? This is what Bill Polian said. This is the order of which they look for things in the draft.
Well, as a GM, you go through a process. When you're in the top 10, you want to pick one of the following. A quarterback, if he merits it, if he can lead you to the promised land. 2, someone who scores touchdowns, a running back, a wide receiver, somebody who can carry your team. 3, a person who can dominate the game on the defensive line of scrimmage, and that would include an edge rusher and a 3-4. 4, a guy who turns the ball over in the secondary, meaning a dominant corner who's got ball skills. And then 5, if all else fails, a left tackle, if one who is there who you can anticipate will be a blue player throughout his career.
So when you say something like, you want the shiny new dress instead of the heavy, dirty work boots, I'm like, no, I'm talking about a franchise quarterback. I'm talking about a franchise quarterback. The most important thing for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. In fact, I'll ask you guys this question. You've got a choice. You can get the best GM, the best coach, or the best quarterback. But you can only have one. The best GM, the best coach, or the best quarterback. Ian, which one would you prefer?
Quarterback.
Everybody would prefer the quarterback. Levis might work, he might not work. Drake May, same way. But Drake May is a better prospect. Like that, every single team in the league passed on Will Levis, including you. And you passed on Will Levis not for a franchise quarterback, not so that you could draft a guy who scores touchdowns, not so you could draft a guy who turns the football over, not so you could draft a disruptor, and not so you could draft a left tackle. All the things Bill Polian just went over, you passed on Will Levis. Like, yeah, Titans don't need, we don't even need to discuss if a potential franchise quarterback is available for the Titans. We don't even need to discuss it. To me, that's crazy talk. And yet there are so many of you out there that are just so all in. One texter says, Brian Callahan has a real modern offense and an offensive line. Those guys could take a huge leap. It's not the same old anymore. Vrabel's strategy was ancient. And then he jokes, except for Phillips, he'll be out injured by game 5. You do realize Arthur Smith's offense that was so successful was a modern offense, right? And that it was the offense that Matt LaFleur brought over from the Rams. And that the reason why they elevated Todd Downing was so they could keep the same offense. So the Titans ran a modern offense. Now, I don't like this Earhart Perkins that they ran last year, but the Titans ran a modern offense under Todd Downing in 21 and 22. It just sucked because he sucked. But you guys act like Vrabel was living in the Stone Age when Arthur Smith was lighting up the scoreboard. That's just not true. You guys were living in reality then. 615-737-1025. We got more of your phones to get to here on the program. Coming up next, there's one thing that I don't think I've done a very good job of. And everybody seems to think this is possible, except for me. We'll do that coming up next. Hey, tune into 94.9 The Fan today as the Sounds take on the Omaha Storm Chasers at First Horizon Park, pregame 6:20. First pitch, 6:35. Sounds baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks Family Leisure and Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. And speaking of them Sounds, be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025, and you'll win a 4-pack of tickets for the Sounds game against Omaha at First Horizon Park tomorrow. So good luck on that. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, the game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So one thing that I do not like is closed-mindedness. I know a lot of you are going to roll your eyes and say, ha, Jared Stillman, you've got the closest mind there is, or whatever it may be. You know, you don't have an open mind, Jared, you don't. And I'd like to think that that's not true. But sometimes, like many of you, when I truly firmly believe something, I kind of shut off the idea that the other side of it could happen, right? And so I have guaranteed that Joe Alt will not go to the Chargers with the 5th overall pick. I have guaranteed it because I look at the Chargers with Rashawn Slater, a Pro Bowl left tackle, and Trey Pipkins, a solid right tackle. You know, this ain't Nicholas Petit-Frere we're talking about at right tackle, a.k.a.
PT.
This ain't PT we're talking about. This is a real right tackle. So they got a real left tackle and a real right tackle, and their number one receiver is Josh Palmer. In a draft where they will almost be guaranteed to be able to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. or Rome Odunze. Or Malik Neighbors. So I have guaranteed that the Chargers aren't taking Joe Alt. No matter how much the Chargers Twitter account posts a video saying, you know, we're going to be offensive line centric around here. No matter how much it's, you know, Harbaugh, the way he built it at Michigan with the line. They got 2 tackles. They don't have a receiver. They can draft what is supposed to be an elite wide receiver prospect. And I'm supposed to believe that they're not going to do that with a franchise quarterback? So I have a hard time seeing it. But Trevor thinks they could do it. Charles Davis thinks they could do it. Mark Dominic thinks they could do it. The Pro Football Focus mock draft thinks they can do it. They have the Chargers drafting Joe Alt with the 5th overall pick. And now, an anonymous former AFC scouting director at a mock draft at ESPN.com, Matt Miller at ESPN had scouts do a mock draft. So each scout had a pick, and then the scout made the pick. Now, again, when a scout says something, it doesn't mean that this is what every scout thinks. But, again, this was a former AFC scouting director who, in his mock draft, has the Chargers taking Joe Alt at 5. And so I have to admit, while I still don't think the Chargers are going to draft Alt because I think the Duck theory tells us they've got 2 tackles. When they traded away Keenan Allen, it's one thing to cut Mike Williams. Mike Williams was set to make $20 million, and the guy caught 19 passes last year. He's played 19 games over the last 2 seasons. That's a no-brainer. You cut that guy every time. But when they traded away Keenan Allen for a 4th-round pick because Keenan Allen wouldn't take a pay cut, I thought to myself, this is a team that definitely knows they're adding a receiver. Because if they weren't going to cut Keenan Allen or they weren't going to trade Keenan Allen, like if they knew that there was a chance they weren't going to go wide receiver, they probably just would have paid full price for Keenan Allen just to make sure that they have a receiver for Justin Herbert. But I have to admit that I probably don't spend enough time on this program talking about what you do if Joe Alt is not available by the 7th pick. And then there has to be a discussion that we have ahead of time. We're going to have the discussion of if Drake May falls to the Titans at 7. We have to have the discussion of what if I'm wrong? And what if the Chargers take Joe Alt with the 7th pick? Then what do you do? Because I know that when we've talked about the Drake May stuff for Mark Dominic's Brock Bowers take on Monday, and everybody's gotten all worked up, Jared, we have to go offensive line. I ask you this question. Do you have to go offensive line so much to the point that you're going to skip out on an elite player when the elite offensive lineman's not there? Or do you say to yourself, well, there's 8 elite players in this draft. Some might say 9. It depends on whether or not you put a Dunze into that group. I don't, but you could. And the Titans sucked so bad last year that you have the 7th pick, and if there are 8 or 9 elite players in the draft, you need one of those elite players. Again, I think the Titans, prize for being as bad as they were last year, is one of Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Brock Bowers, Joe Alt, or Dallas Turner. 8 guys that I think are elite prospects. Now, elite prospects does not mean they will be elite players. But as far as prospects on paper are concerned, they are elite. They have Pro Bowl potential. 8 of them. It's hard for me to accept the fact that with the 7th pick, you would not take one of the elite 8 guys. So the first thing is, maybe I don't do a good enough job of saying, hey, maybe I'm wrong. And maybe the Chargers will actually draft Joe Alt, and everybody's right about, Harbaugh wants to build it, and I'm wrong. I don't think that's the case, but there then does have to be a plan behind it. As far as the former AFC scouting director, he says, quote, I think building the trenches is smarter with the talent stacks in this draft. Get a tackle now, a wide receiver in round 2, and a corner in round 3. That's how you win this draft, checking off premium positions of need in every round. Says we can get a starting level receiver in round 2. Imagine having the first 2 rounds with Alt and Xavier Legette. And so that's kind of the idea of what the Chargers could do there. But then what do the Titans do? Do you immediately? A lot of you will just say trade out. That's great, but you have to have somebody to trade out with. And whoever it is you trade out with, they have to give you something that's worth trading out. Again, I had in my first mock draft, I had the Titans trading out of 7 because Alt goes at 5 in a trade with Chicago. I had the Titans trading out of 7 with Minnesota, but giving up 38, so they received 723 and 108. In exchange, and then after listening to Mark Dominic talk about how all he cares about are top 60 picks, and then doing the math on top 60 picks, it's like, nope. If I'm going to pass on one of the elite 8 players in this draft, which by moving out to 11, I'm running that risk. If I'm going to do that, I need top 60 picks. I need future first and second rounders. I need that if I'm going to pass on that. And so it's quite the pickle if Joe Alt's not there about what they're supposed to do. But this is the question that has to be had. So, in this case, the way I would couch the question if we were having this draft discussion is like this. Alt's gone. And one of Bowers, Turner, Adunze, Neighbors, and May are available. Do you take one of those players? And we'll go through each one. Or do you trade out and hope that you can get one extra future top 30 pick? 615-737-1025. We'll do that next here on Stillman and Company. And we'll answer again. We'll go phones on this again. And that's the question. Okay, Alt's gone. So let's say Neighbors is there. Do you take Neighbors or do you trade back in a trade that takes you out of the elite category but nets you a first rounder in next year's draft? We'll do that next. Score big this spring with Lee Company and the Nashville Predators in the 10K Power Play giveaway. Enter for a chance to win a Kohler home generator or $10,000 towards Lee Company Home Services. Go to leecompany.com/giveaway to enter. That's leecompany.com/giveaway. Contest entries accepted until Saturday, April 20th.
if they stayed there at 5, which way do you think they would go? I've had them going wide receiver, but like I said, I can make a case for them going Joe Alt and going offensive line, this being Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, I think you can make a case for that, and I think that's very fair. I also kind of look at Greg Roman, their offensive coordinator. Obviously comes over from Baltimore. You know, Eckler's not there, and they bring in Gus Edwards, who's a really good back. He's just, as you very much know, he struggles to stay on the football field from a health perspective. But when he's on, he's a really good player. What do I mean by that, though? When I look at Greg Roman and being specifically in Baltimore's system, they have taken vertical press wide receivers, whether it's Rashad Bateman, so Duvernay's, other guys. Obviously, Zay Flowers has been tremendous and a great player, probably the best one they picked in a while. But they continue to do that. And so what I think is, I think it's more likely to take the tight end or the offensive lineman than it is the receiver as of today. Because I think that they could come back around when they're picking at 37, and I think that they could get maybe that's where Xavier Worthy goes. And so you're like, oh, now they got their vertical press guy that they wanted.
There you go. That was Mark Dominic saying he thinks it's more likely that Bowers or an offensive lineman goes to the Chargers than a wide receiver. So add him to the list of people that think that absolutely the Chargers could do this and not the Titans. And again, if Joe Alt's off the board, then this makes it much harder. So here's the question I have in each case, which is, you're the Titans, and you've decided that you want Joe Alt, which most of you have already decided you want Joe Alt, and quite frankly, I kind of want Joe Alt too. So now the draft happens. Caleb Williams goes off the board, this one goes off the board, that one goes off the board, and here you are at pick number 7. Joe Alt is gone. And here you are at pick number 7, but the player whose spot Joe Alt replaces, and I think we know that the traditional mock drafts and everything else tell us that there's the 3 quarterbacks, Harrison, Neighbors, and in this case, it would be Alt. There's 6. So if that's the case, in this initial case, Brock Bowers is available. Dallas Turner is available. Do you take Dallas Turner or Brock Bowers at 7, an elite player with an elite pick, or do you try to trade down and get a future pick in next year's draft? And then the question has to be, okay, well, what's the future pick and everything else? And then it kind of gets complicated. But, one texter says, if Alt's off the board, I would trade down with the Saints for 14 and 45. So you would trade down from 7 to 14. So now I definitely don't get Alt. I definitely don't get Turner. I definitely don't get an elite player, and I may not even get a left tackle. And I just got the 45th pick in return? Like, that's it? I don't know if that's good enough. So in that case, okay, it's Alt or Turner that would be available. Bowers or Turner. Now let's say that Bowers is gone. Say the Giants like Bowers, and now it's Neighbors. Do you take Neighbors at 7, or do you trade down? Knowing that, again, you're going to get a pick or a future or something, but you're not going to get like a massive freaking spanking of a haul. You're not going to get somebody to give you a 1, a 2, and next year's 1. You're not going to get that. And you're going to end up in the range of where you're picking Felis Fuaga or J.C. Latham, not elite ranked players, and you're passing on Malik Neighbors. What do you do there? So, Ian, I'm going to run this by you. The simple trade down, again, we're not talking about a haul here.
Mm-hmm.
A simple trade down or Malik Neighbors.
Neighbors.
A simple trade down or Brock Bowers.
Trade down.
Really?
I think so.
Bowers pretty good.
Yeah.
A simple trade down or Dallas Turner.
Trade down.
See, I think I'd take Turner. Only because, again, what would you rather have in the NFL? Would you rather have one elite player? And remember, look, the positions and the needs and everything else, they matter. Like this time of the year, we don't have a guard. We need a guard kind of thing. It matters, but 5 years from now, it won't matter. Nobody will remember what you needed at the draft. Nobody remembers what the Rams needed going into the 2014 draft. We just know that they took Aaron Donald. And so if you're moving off of an elite player, which I think Turner is, I think Bowers is, I think Neighbors is, if you're moving off the elite player in the trade down, you're getting two average play or two
really good
starting players, right? Like the way that
they
Rick
need
Spielman,
starters.
The way that Rick Spielman described Olu Fashanu. Do we have that Spielman on Fashanu cut here? This is the way that he described Olu Fashanu, and this is what I'm talking about. You're trading down for this plus another top 50 pick.
I had Fashanu down a tier because I don't think he is as complete as Joe Alt. I think the quarterbacks are more complete at their position as we talk today than Fashanu is. That doesn't mean Fashanu's not going to be Fashanu's not going to be a great player, but I just had him a tier below.
Do you think Fashanu has a chance to be special, number one? And number two, does that determine?
I think he'll be, a day one starter. I don't think he'll be in the Pro Bowl category or top 5 at his position by the time it's said and done. But he'll be a solid starter that you can win 17 games with.
Okay. So that's Corey Davis. Like, that's what we're talking about here. Jack Conklin. You know, again. And
Conklin I can do. Davis, probably not.
Well, but again, Conklin was an all-pro.
Yeah.
So Conklin might be better than what Spielman is describing Fashanu as, which is a starter on a good team.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're doing is you're saying no on Dallas Turner, no on Brock Bowers, Roma Dunze?
Probably not.
No on Roma Dunze in order to get 2 solid starters.
2 good starters, yeah.
So in this case, we're using Jonnu Smith and Corey Davis. And you're passing on Jeffrey Simmons.
Well, Johnny was a 3rd-round pick.
Right, but I'm talking about starters that you can win games with. Like, that's what they end up becoming. Starters that you can win games with.
Got to the AFC Championship game.
You did get to the AFC Championship game. But you lost to a team that has elite players.
Quarterback.
And their entire team. Like, they only win because of their elite players. They win because of the 3 to 4 elite players they have every year. The quarterback, the DT, the tight end, and Hill, Snead, those characters. Like, I think I want an elite player. I think I want the elite player. I think I want an elite player over what Spielman just described Fashanu as. Scott is up next here on our program. Thank you for calling and thank you for waiting. Go ahead, Scott.
Jared, I tend to agree with you, except how would you feel in this instance if you trade down and let's say you get 14 and 45, whatever, and you've still got 33, but you wind up with 2 starting tackles, maybe Latham and Fuaga, or maybe Fashanu and Mims, and another top 50 pick. How do you feel then about missing out on one of your top 8?
So now you're talking about I'm getting 3 top 50 picks out of this as opposed to 2 top 50 picks.
No, you've already got 2. You've already got 2. You're going to trade down. Let's say you get 14 and 45, and you're adding that to 33. So with that, you wind up with 2 starting tackles and starting middle linebacker or safety or interior.
I think I'd rather take the elite player. Scott, thank you for your call. I think I'd rather take the elite player. And the example I use is I'm using Dallas Turner as the example here, right? So I think Dallas Turner is elite. Dallas Turner at 18 years old was going up against grown men in the Southeastern Conference.
If you think, if you
that's
think
elite.
Turner is legit, the next Javon Curse kind of, shift, it might be worth it.
You have to take that, right? Like
Yeah.
that pass rusher. So like that, I'm taking that before taking, Fashanu can come in here and he'll play left tackle and he can be okay at it. Like, okay, but I stunk. And when I stunk, I want good players. I want elite out of that. I don't want, Skoronski.
Just, does it matter where they're at in the roster construction and where your team is?
It doesn't matter to me. It only matters to
like,
me.
would it matter if you had Levis and a year or two and he's more developed and or and you try and build, or you just go for the best players and hope for the best?
It matters to me when I don't have the 7th pick. When I am picking at 28 and we're completely out of the elite category, then it matters more to me. But there's a reason why you're picking 7th. And you're picking 7th because you suck. And so that's, again, what was it Polian said? Hey, this is how you draft in the top 10. And you don't draft the same way outside of the top 10 that you do in the top 10. Fitz will join us next on the program. We'll get his thoughts on the draft, the Titans, and all of this stuff. And we'll do that coming up next. Twice Daily, that's my go-to. It should be your go-to as well. Twice Daily has your cravings, and you can save on every visit. So stop in and get rewarded. And all you need to do is join the Twice Daily Rewards program to unlock special discount savings, and you can enter their sweepstakes and so much more. Try the new wraps: Italian, ham and cheddar, turkey and Swiss, Nashville hot chicken. They're made to order with your favorite toppings, and when you download that Twice Daily app, you can order ahead. You can also go to Twice Daily, where it's snack time all the time. And they've got your favorites like chicken fingers, tater rounds, pretzels, and I love the boneless wings they have at Twice Daily. I really do. Twice Daily. What are you craving? Stillman and Company. So everybody's all mad, about all these takes we've had this week, whether it was discussing Mark Dominic saying that the Titans should take Brock Bowers at 7, even if Joe Alt's there. People got mad about that. Me talking about, by the way, Tim Hasselbeck thinks the same thing, and the idea of, hey, if Drake May actually falls in this draft, the way that some people are starting to say, maybe you take him and move on from Levis. And I think now where people are getting mad about the idea of taking Dallas Turner if Alt's off the board. And so all I've just realized is a lot of people just keep getting mad and mad and mad. And now people are just saying crazy things into the text line. Somebody said, Skoronski made the all-rookie team. Actually, he did not. Steve Avila and Osiris Torrance of the Bills did. But with that, Jason Fitz joins us now on the program. Fitz, let's start on Joe Alt. How likely is it, in your opinion, that Joe Alt is available with the 7th pick? And then how likely is it that if he is available, the Titans are taking him?
I said yesterday on one of my Yahoo Sports shows, and I said over the weekend on Fox Sports Radio, if he's available at 7 and Rand Carthon doesn't just sprint up there and take him, I would be shocked. So if he's available at 7, I would just be stunned if it goes any other direction. I do not care about any, there are not 32 starting caliber left and right tackles in the NFL. He is, you talk to any guy that played offensive line at the highest possible level, they'll talk about him in ways that you rarely hear people talk about. He's plug and play. It's 100%. If he was there at 7, I wouldn't blink an eye. I don't care who else is. I don't care if Marvin Harrison Jr. was there at 7. I would still take Joe Alt if I'm the Titans. So that's how much I like Joe Alt. That being said, I think he goes 5 to the Chargers. I don't think the Chargers are lying to people. I think they are going to go with the best offensive lineman on the board, even though they don't have any wide receivers, but they're going to figure that out. Wins above replacement, you can get a wide receiver in the 2nd round where the Chargers are picking. So I think Alt goes off the board at 5, but if he's there at 7, the Titans should absolutely take him.
Add Fitz to the list of people that think Alt's off the board. So with that, if that's the case, and you're the Titans, I believe, and this is just my opinion here, I believe there are 8 elite players in this draft. The 3 quarterbacks, and I'm not counting JJ, the 3 quarterbacks, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Joe Alt, Brock Bowers, and Dallas Turner. If you're the Titans, do you take one of the elite players, or do you take an offensive lineman who's not elite because you need an offensive lineman?
No, you never draft for need that high. I genuinely don't believe that. In general, if you're picking in the top 10, it doesn't matter that you have a need. If the guy's drastically, if you're getting the 3rd best wide receiver or the 2nd best wide receiver, but they're drastically down on your board, then that's one thing. But I think you have to look at this offensive line situation and say, hey, I think the over-under right now on Vegas is at 10.5 offensive linemen to go in the 1st round, some dumb number like that. There's a ton of linemen that are going to go. I understand that. Just because you need one doesn't mean you take one. If you think Brock Bowers is an all-pro, then you take him at 7. I need a offensive lineman, I need a warm body to put in there. You can address warm bodies a lot of ways. I think we have to look at some of this it's almost like house shopping. Just because you have a need doesn't mean that need fits the right budget for where you are. And your good GMs across the league will understand their draft board enough to say, hey, we need great players, so we're going to stay here or we're going to trade down. If you're just going to take an offensive lineman, maybe a trade down. But, yeah, if they're in a situation where they believe that Brock Bowers is, one of those 10 players in the league that can help you win a Super Bowl, then why wouldn't you? And I would remind everybody to look at last year's final 4 teams. All 4 teams that were left had a difference-making, oh, my God, epic tight end. That's not accidental. So having that sort of guy in the right offense can be very, very, very beneficial to a team. Having a great tight end means something. So if you got Brock Bowers there and you've got him listed as we think he's a game changer, you take a game changer. You don't take an offensive lineman just because you need one unless you believe that he's an everyday 10-year starter.
Jason Fitz is with us, Yahoo Sports, Fox Sports Radio. So yesterday I pissed a lot of people off, Fitz, because I said that if Drake May falls to 7, which I don't think Drake May is going to fall to 7, but again, this is the kind of discussions you have ahead of the draft so that when it comes up on draft night, you've already made your decision. If Drake May falls to 7, I take him and trade Levis. And I understand that Levis is not going to have a humongous, I think you can probably get a next year 2nd out of a team like Denver that won't have a quarterback choice. But even if I can't, I'll worry about that later because May is an elite quarterback prospect. Tim Hasselbeck says you take May and you trade Levis, and yet people are furious because A, they think Levis has already proven he's a franchise quarterback, and B, I guess they just don't think the Titans should be in a position to draft a quarterback. What do you think of this specific situation?
If Drake May's on the board and I ran the Titans, I would take Drake May in a heartbeat. And that's nothing against Will Levis. If you looked at Will Levis in this year's draft class, if last year's version of Will Levis was in this year's draft class, he would not be rated above Drake May. Will hasn't shown anything that makes everybody say, oh, yeah, stop the presses. We got our C.J. Stroud. Like, let's not get it twisted. He did some nice things. He might turn out to be really good, but are we really willing to bet that? If you think that Drake May, and I do, by the way, think Drake May's a franchise quarterback, if the Titans are sitting there at 7 and Drake May's on the board, the more interesting thing to me is, like, who's going to offer them 3 years of first-round picks? Like, I keep hearing this among smart people. The Vikings, in order to move up to 4 or 5, are going to have to give up not just this year's 2 first-rounders, but an additional first-rounder. That's the going cost because of quarterback. So the presumption along most league circles is it's going to take 3 first-rounders to move up. So I guess the question, if I'm the Titans, is do I believe Drake May is better than a couple of first-rounders in a second? Because you might be able to get that from the Raiders, from the Vikings, from the Broncos to move up if Drake May is falling and they haven't been able to move into that situation. So I think that gets intriguing. But like I get being a fan of Will Levis. That's cool if you're a fan of Will Levis. But let's not get it twisted. Like, Will didn't turn around and do something so historic that you can say for certain right now, organizationally, you have your quarterback. I think they have a responsibility to be drafted or to be scouting this year's quarterback class and making sure that they're content with who they have above those guys.
See, and to that point, too, when you brought up, the idea about Drake May and about, teams think it's going to cost that much to get up there. I don't think Arizona and the Chargers are moving out. Like, as much as it's, Arizona would love, who's playing wide receiver for Arizona right now? Nobody. And the Chargers, again, I go back with, if these teams move out, they're missing on elite players. And Monty Ossenfort's already got a lot of picks. So it's like at some point you need elite players over just, having a bunch of picks. The thing I don't understand is J.J. McCarthy. Because I do not believe that Minnesota is geared up to go all in for J.J. McCarthy. I do think Minnesota might be geared up to go all in on Drake May. And so I could see a scenario, Fitz, where the first pick goes off the board and it's Caleb Williams. The second pick goes off the board and it's Jaden Daniels. And then New England flops with Minnesota and goes all the way back to 11 for J.J. McCarthy, and that's where your 3 first-round picks come into play. But I don't think Denver it has the stomach to trade all those picks. And I don't know if the Raiders would have the stomachs to trade all those picks for the 3rd or 4th best quarterback. But I think that the 3 first-rounders, I think that's only for Drake May at 3, and that's only if New England doesn't like Drake May.
So if the Super Bowl had somebody fairly plugged in with the Raiders tell me that the Raiders were prepared to offer 3 firsts and more to move up if Jaden Daniels was available. That's the guy that they covet. I just don't think Jaden's going to be available. The hard part about all of this is that a couple of guys that are very, very smart, intelligent people that are not your usual BS people when it comes to all the draft stuff that are plugged in Washington have made it clear to me that J.J. McCarthy really is the number 1 or 2 quarterback on their draft board. Like they love J.J. So I don't know. I don't get it with J.J. I would never I'm not sitting here giving you my opinion on J.J. because my opinion on J.J. is he's the ultimate roll of the dice. Who the hell knows at this point? I just think he's the riskiest quarterback this year because you have so little proof of concept on what you'd be asking him to do. So I think for me, that's a big issue. But for teams, Washington loves him. And that's why, we all know this. You talk to some people and you're like, yeah, you're full of it. No, there's a very real, as I prep for Yahoo's draft shows that we're going to be doing, I have talked to a bunch of people and Washington loves JJ. Minnesota does like JJ. And, I don't know why these teams love him, but I think if you've got a smart quarterback, and JJ is that, he's the only quarterback that was being asked to run the offense in its entirety without the same level of handholding from the sidelines, which I know the Vikings like. If you're a smart offense, there's a lot to like about JJ. And I'm telling you, he does well in the interviews. I spent time with him at the Natty. I can see why teams fall in love with him in the interview. I wouldn't do it. I'd be pretty stunned. I still think quarterbacks are going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. I think the Giants are going to move up to 4. And then in that situation, Arizona moves down to 6, knowing that they're either going to get Marvin or they're going to get Malik. So they can still answer the situation they need, and they can pick up an additional first rounder to do it. So That's how I think the top 4 go.
So if that's the case, you think the Chargers are going to pass on Marvin Harrison Jr. and draft Joe Alt?
Yes.
Okay, then if that's the case, should the Titans take Malik Neighbors at 7?
Yes. They should take Malik Neighbors over whichever. I mean, if you love Fuaga, if you love Olu, if you love one of those, I think, that the Malik Neighbors is better than any of the offensive line prospects they would have available to them right then. I think that, but the only thing is, man, as I say that out loud, I mean, because Malik, I think, is spectacular. But as I say that out loud, the only fear I have is the drop off in the second round is going to be real on the offensive line. It ain't going to be on the wide receivers. There are going to be wide receivers to be had at the top of the second round that can still be a big benefit. So I guess it just depends on what sense they have or what they have in the room. I think personally, when I look at the Titans, that their offensive line is a detriment for a team that otherwise has enough talent, I think, to win some games this year.
Okay, I have a hot take question for you that I want your opinion on. So you are an executive at NBC, CBS, Fox, whomever, and you've got the choice to bid on, and you've got a X amount of dollars, and you've got a choice to bid on for the future. The NCAA Women's Tournament or the Masters. Which property would you rather own on television over the next 10 years?
The NCAA Women's Tournament, for sure.
Wow! That's incredible!
I mean, there's a couple of things that go into it, like where I last weekend said I think the Masters has become the most overrated event in the sports calendar at this point. If you just pull up the current listing of the PGA golfers, good luck. It's like when bro country ruled country music and every artist looked and sounded the same. 90% of these guys, good luck trying to figure out in a store which one's which, because women's college basketball allows players or really, frankly, forces players to stay for several years. You get the better chance at personalities. You get the better chance at rivalries. You get the better chance of, sort of building something over time that people invest in. I think there's going to be a drop off next year. I'm not the total idiot, despite but I think that the drop off is going to be far more minimal than some people think. I genuinely believe we're about to have an era of women's college basketball where they continue to embrace their personalities. They continue to embrace the rivalries that they have, the trash talking, all of these things that you fall into. I covered the Final Four for the first time in my life in Phoenix, and it was amazing. One thing that Danny Green and I did walking around was we asked people that were there if they could name 4 players from the men's tournament or if they could name 4 players from the women's tournament. 90% could name the 4 players from the women's tournament. That's just that's not going to stop. The men's is a one-and-done world that people forget about. The Masters are a bunch of forgettable golfers, and there's not going to be a replacement to Tiger because guess what? There's not going to be a first person that looks like him doing it that changes the way an entire race feels about golf while also being excellent for a 15-year span that nobody can even wrap their mind around. That's not going to happen. So golf is just going to be golf. And if you're super into it, you'll love it and you'll think I'm an idiot. But your common people just sitting around in Kansas, they ain't worried about the Masters, but they'll watch women's college basketball. There's proof of concept on that.
Jason Fitz, as always. Great stuff, Fitz.
Appreciate you, brother. Have a great week.
Yep, Jason Fitz on the program. I mean, I'm on Fitz's side on this, but, he was just not even close, women's tournament. Okay, so we had some revisionist history on Robbie and Rexroad this morning I want to get to that we'll do coming up next here on the program. FanDuel Sportsbook's my official sportsbook app. The NBA play-in tournament gives teams the chance to play their way into the postseason. That's right. So it only seems right that new customers on FanDuel can play their way into $150. Just place any $5 bet and you'll get $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, to use during the NBA playoffs. 3-pointers made in a game, over under point total, first basket score, and more. Just make sure that you're not playing in the game if you're going to be doing this like that moron in Toronto. Just go to FanDuel.com/JGM to get started. That's FanDuel.com/JGM. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 and over in present Tennessee. First online real money wager. Only $10 first deposit required. Bonus issues, non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
The conversations have gotten very serious for the Tennessee Titans to move out of 11 to go up to 3. So what are they moving up for? I was told the approach here had nothing to do with specific position. This was about an individual player that the head coach and GM both agreed is the right choice and who they believe is the best player on the board for this team.
The Houston Texans select C.J. Stroud, quarterback, Ohio State.
Okay, so that was last year. We all remember Diana Gate, where Diana Rossini showed up telling everybody the Titans were trading up to 3 for C.J. Stroud, and then an hour before the draft, the betting market said Stroud's going number 2. So this morning, I was listening to Robbie and Rexroad. Paul Kaharski was in studio, and PK, in my opinion, went full-on revisionist history about what happened. And the sad part about this is that some of you guys believe this, because to me, there is no question that the Houston Texans changed their draft plans based upon you telling everybody what you were going to do. But PK says that's not true. Here's what he said this morning.
I have a hard time believing that somebody in the building told Diana Rossini that they wanted to go up and get C.J. Stroud. Like, what? How would that help them, and why would they do that? A team that never says anything about anything, really. What's the purpose?
Good question.
But the idea that alone somehow let the Texans dupe them. I mean, the Texans had a pretty good plan there to do what they did. We think that came together in a minute after they heard a report that the Titans were interested in Stroud. I don't. I think it's more complex than that. I think it's pretty obvious that I think a lot of us said, well, if the Titans could have a quarterback in this draft, it'd be C.J. Stroud. And where would they have to go to get C.J. Stroud? Well, safely, you'd have to go to Arizona. Well, who has more capital to deal with Arizona than the Titans do? Well, their division rival Houston does. You know, and I talked to somebody in the building afterwards, and they said, it's pretty hard to say you got outplayed by a team that's 7 picks ahead
Had the
of
edge.
you.
Had
Right.
the edge on you from the start.
Okay, I love that part at the end, right? Somebody in the building told me there was no way we could have screwed that up. Of course. Now, the first thing he asked is the most important part, which is, what benefit would it be for the Titans to tell Diana Rossini that they're going to draft Stroud? Agreed. There is no benefit strategically. Maybe there is socially or personally as far as sourcing and everything else is concerned. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but since January 17th or whatever the date was, Diana has not had a lot of info on the Titans, in case you guys have not noticed that or whatever. But see, that's the easy way out, is to say, well, they had the second pick. They were going to take Stroud the whole time. Except that's not true. Unless you believe all the sourced information, Indianapolis, knowing Tennessee didn't want Anthony Richardson, but that they wanted C.J. Stroud, that was written in an ESPN.com article, or whether or not it was Charles Robinson on Robbie and Rexroad right after the draft, and Charles Robinson lives in Houston, and he told you that the Texans changed their plans based off what the Titans said.
The ideology between what player you selected first was based on who Arizona wanted. They knew Arizona had a super high grade on Will Anderson, so if they passed Will Anderson at 2 and Arizona decides, we don't like either offer, now we're taking your guy. They figured that's less likely to happen if we just take Stroud off the board at 2, and now Tennessee goes, well, that's our guy. We're not staying in this now. When they kind of went on the clock, they're like, we got to pick the quarterback at 2 because we have no clue what ultimately Tennessee offered. We have to just take Tennessee out of the running, so we just take the quarterback at 2. If Arizona says, screw it, we're not taking your offer, then we're going to lose Will Anderson, and that stinks. But we're definitely not getting sniped on the quarterback by getting cute and trying to take the defensive player first.
They had a higher grade on Will Anderson. And so what they were going to do is they knew Arizona wanted Will Anderson. They were going to take Will Anderson, and they were going to trade back with Seattle at 5, and they were going to take Stroud. And then they found out that the Titans were going to move up to 3. And so when they heard that, they decided, okay, like the Titans are going to take Stroud if we do that. So we're going to lose one of these players probably. And what happened was the owner said, and this is well documented, the owner said, take the quarterback. And if we lose the pass rusher, we lose the pass rusher. And DeMeco Ryans didn't like that because DeMeco Ryans wanted the pass rusher. So the compromise was, okay, call Arizona, ask them what it'll take in order to get 3. And then they gave up the world. But they would have taken Anderson if you hadn't spilt the beans. Now, you may not have spilt the beans. It may have been Arizona who spilt the beans. That's possible. But, I mean, the beans had to get spilled somehow. Why else was Diana Rossini in town? Why was Diana Rossini, who was supposed to be in Indianapolis where they were drafting a quarterback for sure, why was she sent to Nashville where they took a guard with the 11th pick? And again, I don't know for a fact whether it was Arizona or whether it was you or whether it was whatever. I mean, I just, I just think at the end of the day, when it all comes down to Diana Rossini's reporting, she has not been reporting a lot on the Titans since Mike Vrabel hadn't been the coach. But the idea that didn't happen because they were always going to take Stroud, that's just not true. And it's well documented. Speaking of Joe, it's time to argue Jared versus Joe. And we will do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. It is 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, which means Caroline is here for Jared versus Joe. Hello, Caroline.
Hello, how we doing?
I'm doing well, except for the fact that I was listening to Robbie and Rexroad this morning,
Okay.
and I thought there was great, nuanced, reasoned conversation on the Titans in the draft. And then they let Kaharski in there, and it was just, from that moment on, Titans don't need to look at a quarterback. They have a quarterback. They can't draft 3 quarterbacks. That C.J. Stroud, they didn't ruin the draft pick. I'm like, my God. Joe, what were you guys doing this morning? PK was ruining everything this morning. You guys had good conversations about Drake May and about everything else, and then, PK sits there and plays revisionist history as far as what happened last year at the draft.
Yeah, well, the thing that ticked me off the most was his Isaiah Wilson take, which he couldn't seem to understand, like that two things shouldn't be conflated. But, we're all mad at PK, so I guess we're kind of on the same team on that. In fact, I may have to go back because I heard your last segment, and I seriously, as I told you earlier, I shouldn't have brought that up without reviewing it thoroughly, because I forgot some stuff, and I'm like, oh, yeah, what the hell is he talking about? So I may have to revisit that tomorrow, too.
There you go. All right, time for Jared versus Joe.
Jared Stillman versus Joe Rexroad. Now on Stillman and Company.
On ESPN.
102.5 The Game.
Jared versus Joe is presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville. Caroline, go.
Okay, I'm Amy Adams-Strunk, and you are the general manager of the Tennessee Titans. Let's say Drake May falls to the Titans at 7. You, the general manager, you're in favor of Drake May. Give me your pitch to draft Drake May. If you are against Drake May, give me what compensation you would need to trade back. Jared, you go first.
I would be for Drake May. The argument I would make is whatever the grade is and what the coach says about the quarterback, right? So in this instance, I don't have the coach with me, but I'll use Tim Hasselbeck as my example, right? For what he said on your show, Caroline, about how, he's sat down with Drake May, he's been around Drake May, he's watched all the film on Drake May, and he thinks that the idea that Drake May would fall in the draft is absolutely ludicrous. So let's assume that that's the opinion of my coach because, well, Tim Hasselbeck is a coach. So let's use that, right? So I'm using that opinion right there where, Caroline, you're the one who asked the question, and Tim was just like, oh, yeah, you take him. Like that, period.
Tim's been salivating over Drake May for a year.
Here's the other thing I would say. Will Levis is going to be 25 years old this year. Drake May is going to be 22. Which means that Drake May has significant room to grow and get better that is much bigger than the room that Levis has, because while Levis still has room to grow and get better, Levis is more towards his, biological peak of 28 years old. Also, if you were to draft May, who is a higher prospect than Levis, even a higher prospect than you had on your board last year, because you took a freaking guard at 11, I think that, okay, we're getting 5 years here on a rookie contract as opposed to the 3 years that are left for Levis. And so it all comes down to, is it better to have May and then I would ask for a second rounder in next year's draft to Denver to see if they would make the move to take Levis, because I think they might, because Jarrett Stidham's their quarterback and all the quarterbacks will be gone by 12. But would we be better off with that than we would be with Levis and, say, Joe Alt or Brock Bowers or Dallas Turner? And between that and what Tim has said about Drake May and the age of Drake May and the extra 2 years of rookie contract, that would be my pitch as far as Drake May is concerned.
Yeah, look, first of all, this is a clear indication that we need the draft badly, because I actually totally agree with what Hasselbeck said. I think it's been fantasy all along that he's going to fall. He might fall to 3.
Oh, I think he's going at 2.
Yeah, but if we're going to be in this hypothetical scenario, I'll argue for him 2. Look, I agree with the contract thing, what Jared said. I think the biological age thing is Not that. I mean, you're talking about peak. Well, that's not the peak age of a quarterback of the quarterback's best football in the NFL. The peak age of the best quarterback best football in the NFL has kind of gone up to about 33, 34. So,
Sure.
that doesn't mean that much, but the contract does, having that fifth-year option. And so, I mean, I do think that Drake May is a better prospect than Will Levis. Comparing Drake May now to Will Levis a year ago as a prospect, he's a better prospect. Also, if we're, this exact time a year ago, the consensus, I mean, pretty much the overwhelming evaluation of Will Levis is that he was going to go on the top 5. So, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's as far apart as you might think because we know what happened with him in the draft. But my case would be, look, we believe this is the best player in the draft now. We believe this is a great quarterback. We hope Will is a great quarterback. We think he could be, but we absolutely believe this is. And if you have that certainty, then you cannot pass it up. I mean, I think that's an easy pitch, and I would think that would be convincing. It's just now. Of course, if I'm maybe I'm strong, I'm coming back and say, so why the heck is he available right now? And
Sure.
I don't have a great answer for that, but if you have the conviction, if I have the conviction that he is that level of prospect and that you can't possibly pass him up, that's all you need to say.
So, I mean, I think
And if he's that great of a prospect, you might have to answer to Amy of, tell me why we should pass on him.
I agree, because the board will be up there and she'll be in the room. So if it's like we've got, and the grades are next to him, so if it's like we've got Drake May as the second greatest graded player in this draft, and he's a 6.95, and I'm trying to tell you that Olu Fashanu at a 6.45 is who we should take as opposed to the 6.95. I mean, I could see the owner wanting to know that. So what's crazy to me is I do think that there is a world where Drake May is available to the Titans, but it requires the Giants to pass on him. I could see the Patriots at 3. I think he's going to go at 2 to Washington. But let's say Jaden Daniels goes at 2. I am convinced there's a chance the Patriots actually do think J.J. McCarthy's the best quarterback in this class. The way Charles Joe said on your show that he heard somebody say that the Patriots have J.J. McCarthy number 1. And the reason I think this is because Robert Kraft, Gerard Mayo, Gerard Mayo has never coached anywhere else. He's never played anywhere else. So the only thing that Gerard Mayo knows at quarterback and the most successful thing that Robert Kraft knows at quarterback is what?
Brady.
Tom Brady. So I think I could see Kraft and Mayo seeing that Michigan helmet combined with the intangibles of he's a winner. He's tough because he played for Harbaugh. He's a great leader. He's smart. And saying, like, that's Tom Brady. And the knock on JJ is, well, he didn't do that much in college. Well, Tommy didn't do that much in college. I could see it. Does it sound stupid? Sure.
Yes.
But the Patriots also thought it was a good idea to make Matt Patricia the offensive coordinator. So, it's not like we're out of the realm of them doing things that are stupid. That's the one thing, is I could see New England doing that and taking JJ at 3 if they were afraid that they couldn't move or whatever. And then Arizona's going to say, we got to take Marvin Harrison. And then the Chargers, we got to take Malik Neighbors. And then it would require the Giants to pass on Drake May. But I don't think it's impossible, though I do think it's not very likely.
Well, helmet scouting of any sort is idiotic. But, the winner thing is real. I mean, look, Dane Brewer came on a show this week, and he said, and I agree, I don't think you just dismiss, winning to that level, right? I mean, and the fact that
I do.
J.J. McCarthy. Okay, well, I think
who won the championship last year?
I understand, Jared.
Who won the championship year before that? Who won the championship? So you want Mac Jones?
Well, everybody did. Everybody thought he was amazing.
He's a winner. Yeah, when he's got Devontae Smith and that great defense and Saban and JJ
it's
when he's
down
got the
list.
Joe Moore offensive line and Blake Corum and that defense and Harbaugh. Yes, he's very
and
good.
And you did also watch the Rose Bowl, in which when it came down to it, they had to have him make plays to the air or they don't come back and force overtime, right? That's what I'm talking about.
JJ McCarthy
You
almost
make
threw an
clutch
interception on the
plays that
first
lead
play of the
to-
game.
Did you watch through the end of the game or no?
I did. I watched to the end of the game
Okay.
with Jalen Milrow
So you
trying
watched the
to QB
plays he
sneak at
made.
the end.
All right. But before that, J.J. McCarthy had to make plays with his arm to make it even possible to be in overtime.
I would not draft
what I'm talking
J.J.
about.
McCarthy in
It's
the top
down
16
list.
of this draft. Like, if you wanted to tell me, like, when you get into the J.P. Lossman territory at, like, 24 or something, you could take J.J., fine. I'm not taking J.J. in the top 16 of this draft. Just because he won at Michigan.
Top 5, but he's definitely going in the top 5. Well,
he's definitely going, but I would not take him in the top 15. That's just me. What's next, Caroline?
How high on your list of positional priority is what I'll call it, is wide receiver? Joe, you go first.
So I talked about this today, and it's sort of so straight up just rate the positions by need. I have it behind tackle, edge, and I have it behind inside linebacker because the Titans don't have one. I mean, they have Kenneth Murray Jr., and maybe they can turn him into a consistent player. So that's just as position of need right now. I have it behind that because they have two good receivers this year. Then they have whatever. I mean, Traylon Burks is. We'll see if he can do anything. But they have two good receivers this year. So in terms of just rating the positions, that's how I have it. That said, look, if Neighbors is there, and they have Neighbors rated higher than by all means, take Neighbors. I'm all for taking a receiver if you have a great football player at that position, because you are going to have to, pretty soon, you're going to be changing over. You need a young receiver to grow with Levis beyond Ridley, who's in his late 20s. So that's kind of I understand that's sort of like a two-pronged answer, but as a need by position right now, to me, it's not screaming like you can't function this season if you don't draft a receiver. To me, this defense can't function if it doesn't have another edge rusher, more help on the interior of the defensive line, and a linebacker. And then actually they need a safety too. But like they're going to be in huge trouble if they don't address those positions, starting with offensive tackle, right? They're not going to be in huge trouble if they don't address receiver. But you got a great receiver that you can take? Yes, do that.
I think that young receiver is absolutely a need on this team. I mean, I think every team needs at least three receivers, and you don't have three receivers. So not only do you have two, you have an old receiver and a, declining veteran receiver because, again, Ridley, and we can talk about, I actually agree with Joe that I do think that quarterbacks age much better, but 28 for a receiver is absolutely a peak year biologically. And he's, 29 now? So he has hit that peak, and now he's on the back nine. So I think
he says he's 25.
Yeah. So this team, and not only that, his game is speed, right? Like DeAndre's game is not speed. His game is speed. And so that's another, he runs down the field. And so that's another reason. I think this team absolutely has a need for a young receiver. I think that this team absolutely needs three receivers that they can count on. And, it sucks because Burks has the talent, but you can't count on him. And Westbrook-Akine, you can count on him, but he doesn't have the talent. And so it'd be really nice if you could kind of mix those two together and find somebody like that. But, I mean, receiver is probably right now, as far as the money's concerned, the second or third most valuable position in the NFL. And as I did the math, you are 17th in the league in receiver, so you could absolutely use another receiver that could come in here and could develop into an impact player or be an impact player right away. I mean, the Titans didn't need a receiver in 2019 because the way we looked at it at the time was Corey Davis, Adam Humphries, Taywan Taylor. They don't need a receiver. They drafted A.J. Brown. I'd say that worked out pretty well. So I think they're kind of in a similar spot. The other thing I would say is if I were the Titans, I would think about after the draft broaching DeAndre Hopkins about a 1-year extension. Now, you can finagle it however you want, but I'm talking about a true 1-year extension for DeAndre to make this 1-year deal into a 2-year deal so that DeAndre gets some guaranteed money next year and doesn't have to, face the possibility of going into free agency, but also so that they don't get Danico Autry this year, which is, they got a guy who's a little up there in age and he's not going to be good for forever, but he's good enough right now and his skills are solid enough that I just think that if Levis is your quarterback, you might as well get one more year out of DeAndre just because I just don't want you to be in the situation you are with Autry where you're trying to sign him, but you didn't sign him ahead of time, and so now you've lost out and DeAndre goes somewhere else.
But see, you didn't answer the question. Maybe you're answering it better than I am, but you didn't answer it the same way. Like those positions I mentioned, they can't function. They're not going to be able to function as a football team if they don't have a left tackle. They don't have one right now.
Sure.
To me, there's a defense. They don't have you have to have a linebacker. You have to have someone besides Jeffrey Simmons on the defensive line. Autry really takes away like 2 positions in a way. So, those are bigger needs just on their own. I don't disagree. You could use one. It would be great to have one. Like I said, if the best player is a receiver, do it. And then I think that 38 pick has to be a little bit shaded toward need. Like you have to get a tackle then.
Well, I mean, I'm nervous right now about both tackle spots, right guard. I mean, when I hear that Sadiq Charles might be the starting right guard of the Titans, that does not make me feel very good about that. I'm nervous about safety. I'm nervous about inside backer. I'm nervous on the defensive line. And they still don't have a punt returner unless they're going to try Kyle Phillips back there. And I don't even know how they're going to do kickoffs. I don't know what that's going to look like.
And
so,
this year at receiver, you have 2 good ones. Yeah, we'll see how many years Ridley has left. I agree with you on the Hopkins extension, but this year you have 2 good ones. You have reliability in NWI, and we'll see on Burks. That's a way better situation than all these positions you just mentioned.
Yeah, I guess what I would say though is I feel like in order to say the traditional sense is like 2 starting corners, right? Like 2 starting corners, 3 linebackers, 2 safeties, 4 defensive linemen, that's 11. But really, you need 3 corners to start. And I think you need 3 wide receivers to start, and you don't have 3 wide receivers. Like, sure, you can put Burks out there or NWI out there, but I don't think you have that 3rd receiver that's out there. And that does kind of take me to Bowers, because I actually do think that Bowers could probably kill 2 birds with 1 stone, which is if they were to draft Bowers, I, unlike Chris Sanders earlier today, am not sold on Chigakonkwo at tight end. Bowers could be the tight end, and then he can also flex out and be a slot. And I think he could be pretty good at it in the NFL. So I certainly think, though, I find 3 receivers being what teams need, and you only have 2. More Jared versus Joe coming up next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jared versus Joe is presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville. Caroline, go.
Jared, you go first. Joe Alt's off the board. He goes to the Chargers at 5 or anyone above you. Now what?
So at that point, I have to assume that means that we're going to say what? The 3 quarterbacks are gone, Harrison, Neighbors, and Alt?
Yes. Harrison, Neighbors, Alt, and the 3 quarterbacks. Or 4 quarterbacks, Harrison, Alt.
Okay, well, in that case, I'm taking Malik Neighbors. So,
well,
I mean,
if it's the 3 quarterbacks and the receivers.
So if that's the case, then I'd love to trade back for just an absolute haul, but there's no guarantee that Minnesota, Denver, the Raiders, that they're going to want to do that, right? Like, it's easy to say, trade back. Well, okay, but what if they don't want to? If I don't feel like I'm getting something that's going to give me a top 40 pick in next year's draft, I'm not moving back to move out of the elite player category. So I believe that there are 8 elite players in this draft, 9 if you want to count Odunze. I go the 3 quarterbacks, Neighbors, Harrison, Alt, Bowers, and Dallas Turner. And I will take one of Bowers or Dallas Turner or whatever. Like, I will take an elite player before I will trade back and pick up non-top 60 picks, non-high picks for next year that can equal an elite kind of player. I will take the elite player before moving back to take a Fashanu who might be a good player but not profile as an elite player, even if I don't have that necessary need at edge right now. If Dallas Turner is an elite pass rusher, I'll take him as opposed to moving back for a non-elite something else.
If we're doing the only 3 quarterbacks gone at that point, I'm happily taking Rome Odunze. I feel like a lot of the conversation lately has centered on, Harrison, Neighbors, and I mean, I'd rank it that way, Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, but I do think they should be considered a trio, and maybe this is prisoner of the moment from Indy and his media session. I think the guy's going to be a star. I do. I think Rome Odunze is going to be a star in this league. I think he's a great player. So I would happily take him over. I generally agree with what Jared said about great players as opposed to trading back. Now, what's the compensation? Talk to somebody. If somebody really wants in there, and I can get to a point where I still feel good about taking Olu in particular, then I would consider that. But my first instinct is, sign me up for Rome Odunze. I just think he's kind of been forgotten in the receiver talk here.
So I actually think that Harrison and Neighbors are lumped together. Odunze is in another category, and then there's everybody else after that.
This is the Jared Stillman rating system? Is this using your PFF rankings?
No, this is just how I feel. Like, I like Odunze, but I don't think Odunze is as good as Malik Neighbors.
Like I said, I'm ranking him 3rd, but I think they're in the same tier. I absolutely do.
So I have Odunze.
I love all 3 of them in the NFL.
So, like, I think there are 8 elite prospects in this draft, and I have Odunze 9th. And if you want to make the argument for Odunze as an elite prospect, I will listen to it. I will not listen to you try to tell me that J.C. Latham, for instance, is an elite prospect when I got people like Trevor telling me, he might actually profile better as a guard. Okay, gone. But Odunze I can hear as an elite prospect. I mean, so if the Titans really love Odunze and they're like, yes, we think that Odunze, like Joe, we think that he's at the same level as Harrison or Neighbors, then that's the same as Bowers and Turner and those guys. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to sit there and say, okay, I've got Bowers as an elite player and Turner as an elite player, but he doesn't play offensive line, so at 7 I'm going to draft Fashanu, who is not rated as an elite player. And that is what I'm afraid of people wanting them to do.
That's how you become a bad football team.
And that's what I'm afraid that the fans want them to do. And with the Titans, I mean, they took a guard with the 11th pick last year, so I don't know what they'll end up doing. But to your point, that is exactly how you become a bad team.
On to the next. Joe, you go first. Let's say Joe Alt is there at 7. Is it as simple? Is it as much of a no-brainer as I feel like we're told to believe That if he's there at 7, you take him?
Well, no. Look, that would be my pick, and I'm not. Look, I'm not pretending to grind film on draftees or I don't do it, so I don't pretend to do it. Based on the information that I've consumed, I would go that way. But again, so who else is there? So Joe Alt's there at 7. So tell me who else is there. Because if Malik Neighbors is there, Rome Odunze is there, again, I'm going to defer to the Titans' big board. I could absolutely see a scenario where either of those guys is higher on the big board. And then to me, you have to go with that. You have a lot of needs as a football team. And I do think with Joe Alt, I think he's the best offensive lineman. He's obviously a left tackle, which is important, and that's what the Titans need. But I don't think, and this is a question I asked Dane Brugler on Monday, I don't think that he's not the prospect so good that he's vying for the top spot. Someone asked on our text line this week, how do you compare Joe Alt to Taylor Lewan coming out of Michigan? And I said, absolutely not as good as a physical talent. Now, Taylor Lewan's big thing was the character concerns, and there was some real concern there.
Sure.
I mean, that knocked him down. But as far as athleticism and all the measurables and all the traits that tell you elite left tackle, Taylor Lewan absolutely ahead of Joe Alt as a prospect. So I think I am happy taking someone if I believe Brugler has made this comparison a couple times that he's Jake Matthews, and I'm going to have a guy for a decade plus as a really good left tackle. I like that certainty a lot. But I'm not going to sit here and say absolutely no way would I consider anybody else there, because you have to go with the big board. And again, if it falls at a Neighbors is there, I think it's a very tough decision.
What Mark Dominic said last week's really, I don't want to say gotten in my craw because I don't have a problem with it, but it's definitely in my head a lot about how it's I've just figured, okay, you just take Joe Alt, that's it, the end of the story. Okay, he's your left tackle, he goes to the Pro Bowl, on you go. And, I mean, the way he just, matter-of-factly, just the idea of oh, man, if Brock Bowers is there, I mean, it's a slam dunk. And then when you guys asked Brugler about him, Joe, and he said, that the two concerns that Dane Brugler had about Brock Bowers, one was, well, if you draft him at 7, he's going to become one of the highest paid tight ends in the NFL. I don't care about that. That's Kansas City's problem. That's Baltimore and Mark Andrews' problem when those guys come up for contracts and they're going to say, Brock Bowers is making this much, I need to make this much. That's not my problem. The second part was you have to have a coach that's going to be able to use Brock Bowers the right way. And, if you're just going to put him as an inline tight end, then Brock Bowers is not going to be a special player. But if you've got a coach that's going to move him around and utilize him as a matchup nightmare, well, I mean, isn't that the point of Brian Callahan? Shouldn't we be allowed to assume that as of right now, Brian Callahan will be able to do that?
I would think so.
So I keep thinking about this, and I keep thinking about the idea of, look, I want left tackle to be solved, and I want to move on. But could you get a guy for 1 year this year like Andrews Pete to play left tackle, draft a guy in the second round to use as a tackle that can play right this year, who you can flop over to left next year and be your long-term option at left tackle, which is what the Titans did with Michael Roos when they drafted Pac-Man in the first round in 2005. They drafted Roos in the second round, and after Brad Hopkins left, they flipped him over to left tackle. Could you do that in this year's class and still come away with Bowers, or still come away, Joe, with Odunze or Turner? And this is where that numerical grading and the coaching kind of all comes together. If Brock Bowers has a higher grade than Joe Alt and Brian Callahan says, oh my God, think of all the things I can do with Brock Bowers. Well, Fitz made a point on the show earlier today that the 4 best tight ends in the NFL were probably the 4 teams that made it to the conference championship games, right? Kittle, Kelsey, Andrews, and Laporta. Those might be the 4 best tight ends in the NFL. And those guys are all used. They're not just strictly inline tight ends. So I guess Andrews kind of is, but different offense. But to answer Caroline's question, no, it's not that simple. The two things that matter are this. The first is, how good is the guy you're picking as compared to Alt? Is he significantly better than Alt? Is he the same as Alt? And then the second question is, we're told this is a deep tackle draft, but how deep? Because if it's deep to where there are 7 tackles and there are 9 teams that need tackles, well, when you come back again at 38, there won't be a tackle for you to take. But if there are 15 tackles or there are 7 tackles and 5 teams that need tackles, then maybe you can get one there at 38. And I just don't know the answer to those two questions. So I'll just answer Caroline's by saying, no, it's not that simple.
Okay. I would agree. A lot of agreeing on today's program.
So
Feels a little
friendly. Such
funky.
a friendly episode.
I don't
You know
really
what I was
like
thinking
that.
about earlier today? I was listening to your show, Caroline. The idea about whether or not Cincinnati regrets taking Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell. I think they do.
It's hard to say that they do because they went to the Super Bowl. But also, what's the knock on Joe Burrow?
That he's never
He
healthy.
can't stay healthy.
But see, like I looked at that draft earlier, there were 3 tackles that were taken to play tackle in the second round. They all suck, including Jackson Carman, who the Bengals took. I think he's made 6 starts over 3 years. That was not a deep tackle class outside of the first round. But then there was, Nico Collins and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and there were other receivers in that draft. And it's like, if you're Cincinnati and you knew that there were receivers outside of the first round, but you didn't know that there were no tackles outside of the first round, wouldn't you take the tackle and then get the receiver later, kind of what Detroit did?
Like Nico Collins and Amon-Ra St. Brown are good receivers, but they are not Jamar Chase.
I don't know, man. Amon-Ra St. Brown's pretty good.
Amon-Ra
He's not Jamar
Brown
Chase.
is not Nico Collins either. No, but he's not Nico Collins. He is really
I mean, I'll say this. I don't think it's close between Jamar Chase and Jackson Carman versus Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, agree.
Like
So much
Detroit
agreeing.
clearly got the better 2 players there.
True. I would agree. But
I was just thinking about
Cincinnati got the better receiver and a much worse tackle.
Yes.
But Detroit hasn't been to a Super Bowl.
No, but if their coach could count, then, they probably – although Joe probably thinks what's a freaking guy's name doesn't know how to – goes for it every 4th down.
Dan Campbell?
Him. Probably thinks he's a brilliant strategist. Okay,
You
Caroline,
don't know
who
his
wins
name
this
because
one?
you only call him Coach Up Down.
Coach
Yeah,
Up
I'm a
Down.
huge
I
fan.
forgot about that.
Huge fan of his. I mean, a huge fan of his in-game tactics. Really brilliant.
Coach, go for it. All right, Caroline, who wins this week?
There is a lot of agreeing on today's program, which feels a little icky to me. But I will say Jared wins this week because your case, like if I'm Amy Adams Strunk, your case for Drake May would convince me.
All right. Because that's because you like Tim
Basically,
Hasselbeck.
because he talks more. So because he talks more and takes up all the oxygen, and then I have none left, and I'm just
So
like,
you're
okay,
more than
I mean,
welcome to talk as much as you would like. I'm not holding that against you. There's no time limit here.
I'm not saying that you're limiting me, but I'm saying that when Jared talks forever and ever, like we have to have breaks on this. I mean, I'm trying to think of the good of the station for crying out loud,
You
I mean, we're
let
all
Jared
trying to,
worry
help
about the good
Jared.
of the station on Jared's program. I think Jared's doing okay right there. I'm just saying. I'm kidding.
Oh, yeah, listen to this.
I'm kidding.
Oh,
I'm
my
kidding.
gosh,
I'm
listen to this guy.
kidding. I'm kidding, kind of. Jared versus
Speaking
Joe is
of
presented by
icky.
Pella Windows and
Speaking of
Doors of
icky.
Nashville. Thank you two very much here on our program. Stillman and Company will react to that. Roll along 102.5, 106 through the game.
I had Fashanu down a tier because I don't think he is as complete as Joe Alt. I think the quarterbacks are more complete at their position as we talk today than Fashanu is. That doesn't mean Fashanu's not going to be a great player, but I just had him a tier below.
Do you think Fashanu has a chance to be special, number one? And number two, does that determine?
I think he'll be, a day one starter. I don't think he'll be in the Pro Bowl category or top 5 at his position by the time it's said and done. But he'll be a solid starter that you can win 17 games with.
There you go. That was Rick Spielman talking about the tight end position and the the left tackle situation, and saying, like, look, Olu's good, but I mean, he's not Joe Alt. Alt's going to be Pro Bowler, best player, whatever. Fashanu's just going to be a starting left tackle. So get some bad news. And again, there is a difference between Jared Stillman's opinion and what Jared Stillman is hearing is the word on the street. And so my opinion is that I do not think the Chargers will draft Joe Alt. I have guaranteed that the Chargers will not draft Joe Alt with the 5th pick. I am hearing that the Chargers coaching staff loves Joe Alt. The Chargers coaching staff loves him. Somebody told me that the Chargers coaching staff, and Harbaugh does make the decisions there, but I don't know if this is Harbaugh or if this is somebody on the coaching staff, but that there is a sentiment that they very easily could move him to right tackle, and that they think that he is by far the best offensive lineman in the draft. Now, I'm not sure that that really means anything because a lot of people, probably think that Joe Alt is the best offensive lineman in the draft. And again, the Chargers have a left tackle in Rashawn Slater, and they have a right tackle in Trey Pipkins. Everyone's like, Harbaugh is just going to build this thing on the offensive line. It's like, but when he was at Michigan, did he not recruit receivers? Did he not recruit tight ends? And so, again, I don't know what the Chargers are going to do. I have heard that the Chargers coaching staff loves Joe Alt, thinks they can flip him to right tackle, and they think that he is by far the best prospect on the offensive line in this draft. Not that that's anything shocking or new, but that does seem to be the one team that you're in contention with when it comes to Alt, or at least that's what the public perception is. New England doesn't have a left tackle. They let Trent Brown go in free agency, and we never talk about them, but it's because it's like New England has to go quarterback, whereas these other teams don't necessarily have to do it. But the Giants have 2 tackles. The Giants actually have 3. Arizona has 2 tackles. They drafted one in the top 10 last year. So they're kind of out on the alt market. I don't see the Chargers with any wide receivers, and Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors should be available to them. But again, I was told that the Chargers coaching staff absolutely loves Joe Alt. So keep that in mind. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll wrap the show up next with, again, a story that I read today that I can't say I'm really shocked by. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
reporters, one I know, the other two I trust, Don Van Natta Jr., Seth Wickersham, and Jeremy Fowler of ESPN, are reporting Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons, when he was going to hire a coach, spoke twice with Robert Kraft, Bill Belichick's former boss, owner of the Patriots. They spoke twice. And during those conversations, Kraft acknowledged he felt betrayed by Belichick at the end. They were not trying to sink him, but they weren't going to send him a lifeline and get him hired. They were brutally candid about Bill Belichick. So first of all, Belichick ruled with an iron fist and was never terribly collaborative. If you're seeking a great job referral after 20 years of keeping your thumb on people, good luck. It's the basic physics. For every action, there's a reaction. There's a reason Brady's adored and Bill's not. He even alienated the greatest player in league history. So again, you can lead in several different ways, but it will not end well for people like the late Bobby Knight or maybe Bill Belichick.
So that was Colin Cowherd today. Again, the story is that Bill Belichick didn't get a job because, well, nobody in Atlanta wanted to work with Bill. The owner liked Bill, but all the lieutenants didn't want to work with Bill. The GM didn't want to work with Bill. The president didn't want to work with Bill. None of them wanted to work with Bill. And so it was like, well, you know, none of these people want to work with Bill, but Bill has assured us that he'll be able to work well with these people. But Bill has a history of not working well with others. So what do we do? And what I've learned in life is this. It's easy to get what you want. It's easy to say, okay, you know, I want to be head coach. I'll be head coach. You'll have the power. I'll be head coach, and we'll go from there. The hard part is proving to somebody that you actually can be agreeable and can work with others. Bill's got one way to do that. Be a coordinator. He won't do it, but that's it. Because everybody's afraid if they hire Bill Belichick in a couple of years, they'll have to fire Bill Belichick, or Bill Belichick will retire, and then Bill will have completely uprooted their entire organization. And I can't say that Bill hasn't given everybody enough reason to think that that's likely to happen. If you really think Bill can get along with others, just look up the name Bobby Greer. That's going to do it for us, Stillman and Company. We are out of here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Roman Yossi will kick off the Preds playoff preview show right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Preds Insiders is next.